This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is Mario Nawfal, the entrepreneur, blockchain expert, angel investor, and citizen journalist. You are the host of The Roundtable, the largest show on X Spaces with an audience of millions tuning in every week. Your guests have included Elon Musk, Hunter Biden, Sam Bankman-Fried, Andrew Tate, Mark Cuban, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, and many, many more. You have become a leading figure in a new wave of alternative media and citizen journalists with the goal of covering the news in an unbiased manner, focusing on facts and offering both sides of the story. You've also founded and built numerous companies, including IBC Group, the international blockchain consultancy firm with a network of experts in over 40 countries. Ultimately, you believe that mainstream media is dead, online censorship is real, and people must seek out new media to find the truth. Mario, welcome to London Real in Dubai.
Brian, you're probably the best person to discuss this with, especially when it comes to censorship. So thanks for having me.
Dude, it's a pleasure having you on here. I know you don't do many of these, so I can't wait to get inside your mind. I want to go straight to it. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, I was in London. It was 8 o'clock at night, and I saw one of your spaces open up with Alex Jones, and he was going to talk, I think, about being replatformed on Twitter. He had just done a Tucker Carlson interview. Now, I've known Alex for a while. When I was censored in 2020 during COVID times, he had me on his show. And I tuned into your space, and within minutes, it's Alex Jones, Elon Musk, Andrew Tate rolls up with his brother Christian, then Vivek Ramaswamy comes in, and you've got this crazy, surreal discussion happening between 4 or 5 men that you probably will never get in the same room. And yet here they are talking real, uncensored, unscripted, and there's over 100,000 people watching live. And I just want to know from your perspective, and you're moderating it too, so you get to try to moderate this thing at the same time. What's that like to do something like that? Do you pinch yourself sometimes that it's actually happening? And then, what are the ramifications? This is literally almost a new form of media that you've created.
I think most people don't understand how important this is. Like, you've got some of the most censored people on the planet coming on and discussing some of the most pressing issues. Mainstream media will never platform these people. They won't platform them at the same time. So to have them rock up, like Elon wasn't planned to be there. It was Alex Jones, and I messaged Elon, hey, can you jump in? He was able to jump in. And Tristan, I think we messaged, Andrew came in afterwards. I think he just saw the space. I think that was the first time he joins our space. And, there's a few important points. First, the important role X is playing when it comes to media. All these different news outlets, they barely cover my spaces, except when it's a topic they like. So that space didn't get much attention. Everyone liked the fact that Vivek went to the bathroom while his mic is unmuted, despite very important issues being discussed. So in terms of me pinching myself, we've had a lot of these spaces. I've been doing this for a while. I pinch myself when I start seeing the real world impact. Like so when I go out of my little bubble, we talked about it earlier. I'm in my room or in my house, running the space. I don't know that there's millions or hundreds of thousands listening on the other side. I don't know the impact it has, especially when I cover something like the war in Gaza. So when I did that space, I didn't know how many people actually listened to it until I go out and people are like, that's an incredible space. Not sure if I can curse. If I do, I apologize. Sorry. That's an incredible space. And then it starts to click like, holy shit, like there's never been an interview with that many censored people in one place. And then it's all unscripted. So you have no idea what they'll talk about. And I became an audience member. So I was moderating it, but most of the time I was just sitting there and listening because I'm there to facilitate it. It's not about me, it's about them. So it was one of my I put it in definitely my top 10, top 5 spaces we've ever had, and it's unplanned. A lot of our spaces that blow up are unplanned. This is what's different to spaces beyond being uncensored, is that you don't know who may rock up. Right. Like when we're doing the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, we didn't plan for Bill Ackman to jump on. Like we're doing another show with him that is planned, prepared, but when he jumped into the Silicon Valley, which he was leading the way in one of the leading voices when it comes to the government response to the collapse, he wasn't planned. Mark Cuban wasn't planned. Jason Calacanis wasn't planned. All the other guys, they just rock up because they see the space there. And that's the beauty of it. And I think it's very, very underrated. It's very different to any other media that exists because shows are scripted. Interviews are organized in advance. whenever there's, CNN, Fox News covering an event live, they bring their guests, they schedule their guests in advance, which we do as well. But they can't bring, so if they're talking about the mutiny in Russia and a politician in Russia is listening to CNN's coverage, he can't just phone in and jump on. It's very rare. Yeah. On Twitter Spaces, all they need to do, and it happens a lot, a politician is listening. We've had that happen. Senators in the US, politicians in the Arab world, they just press one button. We see the request, we vet them, and we've got a politician that's up, or we had journalists come on and we can hear the airstrikes in the background, or the gunshots when we did the Ukraine war, the gunshots in the background. So that's something else about Spaces that people are not talking enough about. That's why we're so focused on that platform. It's very different to anything else.
Yeah. I mean, again, I guess if Elon hadn't taken over Twitter, this wouldn't be happening necessarily.
I've been doing Spaces well before Elon. And, whenever we stream, in the early days, we used to stream our Spaces on YouTube. They get taken down.
Right.
Because it's not scripted and we don't control the content. And we cover both sides. So, for example, the war in Gaza, I'm happy to have people from Gaza, if members of Hamas, I think we had a member of Hamas come on, they're welcome on. Which other outlet will bring a Hamas member on? And of course, the IDF has been on. I think we've had politicians from Israel on at the same time. Politicians in Lebanon on at the same time. Lebanese and Israelis, they're legally not allowed to be on stage together. Lebanese people are not allowed to talk to Israelis. They're not allowed to share a stage. They're not allowed to interview them. Yet we have them on stage together on Spaces. This is not something I could do on any other platform. Rumble, which you're a proponent of free speech. Rumble is similar to Spaces, to Twitter, to X. And they've done a great job in fighting censorship. But as we were talking earlier, it's a very, very tough uphill battle.
Yeah, very much so. Besides that Elon one, and again, it was just crazy because none of those guys have probably ever had a conversation with each other. I think Alex and Andrew have talked, but just Elon, I'm sure, has never had a conversation with Alex Jones.
Never.
And he never probably, has had a conversation with Andrew Tate. I doubt he has.
No, they've never talked.
And now they're all talking at once with a presidential candidate chiming in. And like you said, it's unscripted and it's just wild to see what happens. Also, what I found interesting is that Elon asked Alex some hard questions that were bothering him about Sandy Hook. And Alex answered, and Elon was like, okay, all right, solved. So like in a weird way, you have just squashed a beef that could have massive ramifications for freedom of speech, for censorship, all this stuff. I mean, this is a new form of medium. It's a new medium,
Another thing as well is that most people don't understand when you're on stage in those spaces, it feels like a phone call because it's just audio. You're jumping on, you can just request up. We had a lot of speakers that call it a phone call, like I joined Mario's call, like a Zoom call. Yeah. And that's important because they have the comfort. Like, for example, here, if you haven't done a lot of interviews, you'd be stressed. You've got the lights, you've got the cameras, and that's most formats are structured like this. So it means I know I'm on the spot. I know there's a camera. And instinctively, I'm going to be paying attention to that and what I say. Yeah. But if I'm just in the car and Vivek was in the bathroom afterwards or in bed, or, we had Elon join once and he's, getting dressed to go into a conference room while in the space. There's that level of comfort and you forget that the world is listening. Yeah. It becomes like they're on a phone call together or they're sitting on a table together. So it becomes very raw and a lot more open. Some things that were said, like the first time that ever happened, I realized the power of it was when I was in the space that blew me up, the FTX space. When FTX first imploded, no one would believe what we know now. We were the first to have a whistleblower come on. Her name, I won't mention her name, but she's in a recorded space. She came on, she worked at one of the top exchanges in crypto, and she was talking about exactly what we know now. The beef between CZ and SBF, what SBF has done, all the allegations, which ended up being a lot worse. Back then it was a massive shock. So she came on, she was sharing it because she felt like it's a private discussion. And later her voice started crackling. I remember that space really well. And I realized that she's getting pressure on the other side. And then suddenly she's like, guys, actually, I cannot keep talking about this. And she starts messaging us, guys, can you delete it? We can't, it's a live space. I can't keep doing this. I'm getting a lot of pressure. And then she leaves the stage. So I realized that you have whistleblowers. We work with James O'Keefe, who does a weekly space with us. Whistleblowers are more comfortable, and I had that a lot with FTX, more comfortable joining our space than going on Fox or CNN and having all the cameras point towards them, because they have that feeling of security and that rawness to it.
Speaking of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried joined one of your spaces when all this was kicking off, right?
Exactly. Yeah, he's the first public appearance he made, or the second. I think the first was New York Times. So the second was on our space, and that was in a court paper. So I found it recently. They talked about my space in the court papers, which is crazy to me. And when I was doing it back then, I never thought would be part, because he said some things that were incriminating in our space that backfired on him. But yeah, so that was. FTX was pretty wild.
Right. So I know you had a bunch of big ones along the way. I listened to your Silicon Valley coverage when I was in London. I listened to your Russia coverage. And we can talk about those. Those were crazy moments. And again, sometimes your streams go on how long? Like, what's your longest?
FTX was probably one of the longest. The Russian one will probably be the second, and the Gaza will be the third. So with FTX, obviously, it was nonstop because it was just kept getting worse to worse to worse. So I would do a space for like 20 hours, then I'd sleep for 3, then I'd do another one for 24. And that wasn't all planned. I never wanted to be in the limelight, but there was a need for it. So then I go to sleep. 4 hours later, I get woken up because the hack that happened, and all the funds were getting siphoned off from their wallets. And then I have to do another space that ends up going for another 24 hours. So that was one of the wilder ones. And I had no team. I had my whole team, like my whole company. I have an incubator. That's my main business. I had to freeze everything, move my entire resources to be able to operate that space and get a team to vet the news, vet the like I've done spaces before, but more structured, and I've done Clubhouse rooms. I used to do the biggest rooms on Clubhouse, tiny compared to the FTX space and what I have now. So I wasn't ready to deal with what I have now. Now we've got the infrastructure to deal with it. So that was a crazy one. The mutiny one was probably one of the more surreal ones. Was crazy because I was doing the submarine one. Remember the submersible that got lost?
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of people on it. Everyone's trying to figure out, are they alive, not alive?
The Titanic one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I covered that one. I wasn't planning to, but I'm like, let me try to do a space. It blew up for 20 hours. So I did that. I got 6 hours of sleep. Did Imran Khan interview, the former Pakistani prime minister, not long before he got arrested. And while I'm doing the interview with Imran Khan, the mutiny started. So I'm talking to Imran, who met Putin, and he was with Putin. He said it in the space. He was the first person Putin told outside his circle that, hey, we're invading Ukraine, because he was meeting Imran Khan while the invasion was happening. So Imran Khan was telling us about that experience and his thoughts about the mutiny, and he's asking me for updates, like, hey, what's happening? And I give him updates. The mutiny's happening. So we end the interview with Imran Khan, which is already a crazy interview. Pakistan was all watching. And then immediately kick off the space for the mutiny. That goes on for 24 hours exactly, because that's how far along the mutiny. It's just insane. And then I end that. I had to go film a reality TV show in LA. So I packed my bags, head off to LA, and that's where the hit pieces begin, the biggest ones. So I had to do, that was probably the crazy one. And then the Gaza war was crazy because it's ongoing till now, 102, 3, 4 days and counting. Yeah. So that was, that sucked up a lot of energy, but I had more resources for the Gaza war and even the mutiny than I had back during FTX.
Okay, good. Well, I want to dive into a few of these things, including the hit piece, and I want to talk about a couple of these spaces because each one was slightly different, and I want to find out how you stay on point. You don't have any journalism background, do you? No formal training. So how are you making decisions on how you want to be a journalist in real time? This is in a brand new medium where there's no rules.
Yeah, so a lot of people, everyone asks what my stances are on everything. I get called a Zionist and a Hamas sympathizer. I get called pro-Russian, pro-Ukrainian. I get called a Democrat, a Republican, which is perfect for me. As soon as one side is happy and one side is not happy, it means I'm not doing something right. So your question is, I don't have a journalism background. I think that's a good thing because I've got a lot of respect for real journalists, and I wouldn't put them all in one basket. There's journalists that have nothing better to do than write hit pieces and fabricate information. And there's others that risk their lives in war zones to bring stories that no one else would cover. They're not the same, but they're both called journalists. I think it's unfair. I don't have that background, but since I was a kid, because of a few personal experiences, I've learned to always be in the middle on any issue. You've said this before. You got to allude a little bit. What were these personal experiences? Because it clearly defines who you are today. Look, I've seen how polarizing topics, and this is very important for the US right now, polarizing topics could destroy families, which I went through, could destroy friendships. I think someone put that warning out. We tweeted about it a couple of days ago. someone was warning about this is going to happen in the US. And it was yesterday. It's like, friendships are going to get destroyed. Families are going to get destroyed in the next election because of how polarized the US is. Organizations, cultures, companies, employees, it's going to get ugly. But it's still very, very different and much better to what you see in Arab countries, in Eastern European, in some Asian countries, African countries, where people kill each other because of political or religious ideologies. So I have no religious beliefs. I have no political stances.
But you have a family background that makes you
sensitive
to the facts.
My family was almost gonna. So my mom and dad's family are completely split politically. I spent time with my mom's family, and they brainwashed me when I was a kid on why their political stance is the right one and the other one is horrible. I spent time with my father's family, complete opposite. They got pictures and like obsessed with them. And their history, two of my family members within one family, my mom's family, almost went to war against each other on two separate sides. I find that to be extremely stupid. So since then, and always being in those political discussions, I've been in politics technically since I was a kid, because I was obsessed with it since I was a kid. Even though my business, I almost did political studies in university before I went into banking and finance. So my obsession in politics has existed for a long time. And I've seen, it's very simple, man, and you know it better than everyone. There's a lot we don't know. We come to conclusions. We fight with others because of conclusions that we have based on extremely limited and filtered information. So I decided to never come to any conclusions and instead always look for this information, always ask questions. I made that promise to myself as a kid. That's what I do now. I ask questions and I always have both sides on stage, and I get attacked for it all the time. I got so much hate when I got Alex Jones. But I think, even though I disagree with a lot of what he says, it doesn't mean he shouldn't have a platform and have a debate with others. And I'm not the arbiter of truth. Right. The audience is. I try to bring information in a balanced way.
That's the statement there. You're not the arbiter of truth. And you recognize that you got to check all your biases at the door and just present both sides equally. And because your family history, that's burned into you. You're originally born in Lebanon, then you went to Australia, but you had all this stuff mixed up in the family.
Exactly. I migrated to Australia as a kid, so I've lived in a democratic country, a very open. Australia is an incredible country. I've got a lot of respect for the culture they have. And that's kind of what kind of built me. But I do have a Lebanese background. And I've seen that country is extremely polarized, like probably one of the most polarized countries in the world. It's a mix of religiously, it's got Christians, it's got Druze, Sunni, Shia, and within Christians, there's different groups. Christian groups are split and they went to war with each other. Sunni groups are split, went to war. Shia split, went to war over the last few decades. And they all fought together. Then Syria entered, then Israel entered, then the US is involved. Europe. It's a melting pot of all this bullshit from all around the world kind of mixed together. And I'm just witnessing, it's probably the best place to see how little we know, especially now, obviously having access to the people that I have access to. I see the information that the world doesn't have, that I'm not allowed to share on stage. And like, guys, like, you're coming to those conclusions, but you have no idea how little you know. And Lebanon is the perfect example of a country just gone to shit. It's considered like they used to call it the Switzerland of the Middle East.
The Paris of the Middle East.
Paris of the Middle East, decades and decades ago. And now it's just a corrupt, destroyed country with massive inflation. And that's a society that's just left the country. Most Lebanese people left, like when my family migrated when I was a child. So in hindsight, it's a good place to kind of get the experience and have the values that I have today.
Okay. All right. That really helps, because that's why we know why you're doing it, right? What does Simon Sinek say? Start with why. That's your why. You really, really feel passionate about trying to present the facts and trying to present them equally so people can make decisions and get out of their own echo chamber. We're all in echo chambers. We all bring our emotional baggage to the table. And then a lot of our social medias, they take our echo chamber and they isolate it even more and feed us back what we want to hear. And so nobody can really have these open discussions with each other. It's rare.
Exactly. Like what fulfills me is when I go on my X, which Twitter, which is where most of our focus is on, almost all of it. And I see, Israeli extremists, I'm going to go down the extreme path, and Palestinian extremists, Palestinians that want Israel not to exist, and Israelis that just think Israel should take over Gaza, both of them engage on my posts and attack me when I post something they don't agree with, but retweet something that they agree with because I cover both sides. And it exposes both sides to the other side. Otherwise, they'll be in their own echo chamber. I'm sure if I just posted pro-Palestinian content, the Israeli side will just block me and they'll never be exposed to it. And if I post pro-Israeli content, the pro-Palestinian side will never listen to me. But if I post both, then they'll both attack me, support me, depending on what I post, and debate in the comments. I think that's what fulfills me. And that's something I'm sure there's others doing it, but I haven't found one platform or I'm talking about X, one account that has that, at least when it comes to the topics that I cover.
So you're a peacemaker in disguise.
Look, my goal, I think what will fulfill me is that if I manage to, we've had real world impact and I'm very humbled by it. But when I take that to the next level, a good example now, something that is still far-fetched in my opinion, but if I have Putin and Zelensky sitting on a table together in my space with different moderators, just having a frank conversation with the world listening without any involvement from any other countries, just them, two of them sitting down. I know that's not how politics works. Maybe it doesn't lead to something. I'm not saying they're going to reach peace in such a format. It's not how peace is reached. That's not how political decisions are made. I respect that. But just the fact that they managed to have that conversation, the amount of people that were blocked, they blocked each other. I can give you so many examples, or I'll try to remember some of them. They blocked each other and they come on my stage and they have a civil discussion, but for years they've been attacking each other and they make peace on stage. You use Alex Jones and Elon Musk as an example, and Jason Calacanis came on at the end as well, and then went back and forth with Alex Jones as well. That's happened so many times, and this is this is probably one of the few things that fulfills me. It's nice to see that. I wish there's more of it, but I'm not too hopeful.
And like you said, you're not naive enough to think that a Twitter space is going to solve a war. I'm glad you say that. But you're also not, short-sighted enough to think that it couldn't start something that would lead to a peace. And look at all the things. Look at Reagan and Gorbachev. I mean, that closed down a massive Cold War. That brought the wall down because two men could find a rapport. Okay, politically, it still had to be maybe the right place at the right time. But you might argue if they weren't talking, that could have been postponed by 5 years, 10 years.
How many problems, I used to tell this to my employees for years now, most problems are solved with communication. You'd be surprised how dumb people are. Yeah. Like some of the stupidest problems, my employees are fighting about something silly. I'm like, guys, just get on a call. Like, we don't need a call. This is black and white. Just get on a call. They get on a call. Later, they're best friends. And you'd be surprised how this applies. I'm surprised even to the smartest and most powerful people in the world. You put them together in a room, magic could happen. Again, I'm not being naive about it, but I'm also surprised by how much impact it has. So I think dialogue is what we try to achieve, and we try to be, I cannot think of any platform that is as centrist or as unbiased as us. The mainstream media, some of them, obviously CNN, Fox are good examples of biased ones. There's others somewhere in the middle, Reuters or AP are good examples. So, but still them, they've got their biases. If Hamas put out a statement, I'll use Gaza Walk as the most recent and most fresh, we put the Hamas statement on our platform. A lot of people are attacking me. Why are you giving them a platform, etc.? I'm like, they've got millions of protests around the world that want to hear them. You can disagree with them, but don't you want to know there's a war against them, what they want to say? And then IDF put out a statement and I posted on my channel. And they're like, Mario, why are you posting Israeli propaganda? I'm like, guys, I'm posting what the statements made by two sides in a war. If that's propaganda, it's scary what the world has gotten to.
Let's talk about Gaza, because it's the most emotional, it's the most extreme, and it probably pushed you to the limit. I've heard you on some of those spaces, and I mean, let's be honest, that emotion's dialed up to 100. Even though, Russia was dicey, but you've got people on those spaces, and sometimes you have to tell people to quiet down. Sometimes you have to say, look, you're being biased here, you're getting emotional. Walk me through how that started and what it was like and what you've had to deal with, from both sides. And how do you keep that space going? How do you stay objective? Do you ever kick yourself afterwards and say, man, I really messed up there? I'm objective. I do take stances at times. Like, for example, in the Gaza war, I think it's a very nuanced war. It's probably the toughest one to cover. It's the most polarizing. The one I got canceled for
attempts to cancel me the most. It's much harder to cancel me now based on what I've gone through. We'll talk about that later, as you mentioned. But I've been targeted the most for that one by various organizations from all sides. I lost employees. I lost co-hosts from both sides. But I eventually get a lot of respect because people eventually saw that I'm trying to cover both sides. And there's value in doing that, no matter what the issue is. It was a really hard one. So my stance is, for example, I think a ceasefire is necessary. And that's the stance I take. I think I'm very anti-war. I think everything could be solved in both sides coming together and speaking. But this is where it kind of stops. Beyond that, as soon as I start taking stances, even though I have stances personally, I don't share them, or I try not to have them impact the space. And I'm really good at that. I'm really good at detaching myself. I've been doing it for too long, on a personal level and with the show. I don't let them impact the show, because even if I believe in those stances, then the whole show could be put in a bias category. And no one's managed to do that on any topic yet, because I get attacked by both sides all the time, which is great. But that one's really tough. I've covered Israel, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the past twice, because there were clashes prior to this war that I covered. And I remember we had people play Hamas communication on our stage live as Israel was hitting a camp in Lebanon. It's a pretty surreal space. That was prior to the war. Even those spaces and the Iranian ones, when the protests were happening, they were really tough. I'm like, these ones, I have to be there. So my co-hosts, who's been my co-host for many months, obviously he had a very strong stance on one side. So we parted ways because of that. And
because he thought you were being biased to the other side.
To the other side. Eventually he understood that I'm trying to be centrist. He disagrees with me, but he's extremely biased on one side. And I respect it. I've never badmouthed him or anything, but he was very passionate about that.
Is it because when the emotions get so high, the logic goes out the window, even with people that are super intelligent and super logical? Is that what happens?
Yeah, I'll mention in a general way. Yes. Some of the smartest people get triggered. Everyone has a topic that triggers them. I haven't had one person on my stage that could be extremely unbiased about everything. Like, I'll use my co-host as an example. He was extremely unbiased even though he had his opinions on almost everything, he ran spaces in a very unbiased way. He was great at it. He couldn't do it with that one. He's just too passionate about it. And he built an incredible following, and he's got his own niche in that audience. He's done a great job taking that stance, but it just shows how difficult it is to be unbiased. And I never knew how difficult it is until I started struggling finding people to cover for me, because I don't want to be moderating every single space. And I realized how bad the human brain is to just accept the unknown. I don't know what the real motives are behind the Russia war. I can make assumptions. I don't know. I don't know what Israel's motives are in Gaza. I don't know what Hamas's motives were prior to October 7th. I can only make assumptions. There's a lot I don't know. But the human brain is designed to, that's why we come up with conspiracy theories. That's why, I believe religion is, it's kind of an answer to the unknown, in my opinion. So a lot of people can't accept the unknown. It's scary. The unknown is extremely scary. And I think once you accept it, it opens you up to a whole new way of looking at things and of handling things that kind of allowed me to build the platform that we have, which was not planned at all.
What was the hardest moment during the whole Gaza conflict? I mean, in the early days, you must have watched footage or heard things from the attack, and then later probably seen things on the other side, or maybe it was a guest.
I've always received death threats. There's countries I can't go to. Countries if I go to, I have significant security. So I've received a lot of threats, so audience size helps. So the more clout you have, the more you'll be targeted. Fine, but because of the topics I cover, like if I have a massive audience size, but I talk about U.S. politics, all right, I'll get threats. But it's U.S. politics. I take death threats in the U.S. very different to death threats in Eastern Europe or death threats in the Middle East. So,
how many countries have you received death threats in?
There's a whole list of countries that if I go to, I do it very discreetly. I very carefully. I never announce when I go there. I don't go there, period. But if I have to go there for any reason, I was invited. I'll just use one as an example. I was invited to go to Ukraine, to the war zone, and me and another politician by a politician from Zelensky's cabinet, and that was a while ago, and I seriously considered it. But then it's just too much attention, because I had a lot of Russian people from the Russian side on my stage. Ukrainians aren't going to be too happy on this. Isn't there a journalist in Ukraine that was, I think didn't he die in jail recently, a few days ago?
Yeah.
And a journalist that was critical of the war. So I ended up not going. But there's a whole list of them. And I have team members as well.
That work 10 or 20 countries.
There's a lot. And the more issues I cover, the more that list was going to increase. But I think, it's part of the game because of the issues that I cover. The toughest one is, again, I don't want the sympathy towards me because there's people in Gaza that suffered, in Israel, but mainly Gaza, obviously, considering the death toll there, that suffered significantly more, that are suffering significantly more. I had a pilot from the IDF come on, and pretty strong stances. Like if there's a school with Hamas members or Hamas weapons in there, but there's also civilians, would you bomb it? Yes, I would. And I've done it before. I'm paraphrasing here. And he's explaining why striking targets that have civilians there is not a war crime and is justified. And then I had another person, his name was Ahmed, on that stage. It was heartbreaking. And he was talking about how his family, he has 7, 8, again, I could get the numbers wrong, family members killed by IDF pilots. And he's talking to an IDF pilot. Where else would that happen? I had another space where I had someone on the Israeli side that lost family members on October 7th and someone on the Palestinian side that just lost family members that day. And they both found out on that day and they were talking to each other. I had another guy, also his name was Ahmed or Muhammad, and he lost, he came on, every time he loses family members, he comes on our space to talk about it. In the passion and the pain in his voice. I just don't think you understand the pain of losing so many family members. And he comes on our space to talk about it. Remember, we have pro-Israelis on there as well, listening to him. And they support the strikes that are happening. And there's a victim of those strikes on stage as well. He kind of gave me an idea. I want to get that journalist, the Al Jazeera journalist that lost his whole family, but then worked the next day. Then he got bombed and he lost his cameraman and he was in hospital. Then he worked the next day. And now, a few days ago, he lost his brother. And he's still working. I want to get him on. It just gave me that idea. But there's these moments that happen on the Ukrainian side. I'll go back to Gaza, but I had fighters on the ground on the Russian side, fighters on the ground on the Ukrainian side, on stage together. But on the Palestinian one, considering the amount of the death toll and the amount of suffering that's happening, it's a tough one. And these were hard for me to stomach. Obviously, there's things behind the scenes that happen, a lot of footage that I see, obviously, to post. People I talk to that don't want to come on stage. It's sometimes hard to stomach, but I've become almost immune to it now. And a good one would be what's the one I wanted to mention? That was a really hard one to stomach. I forgot it. I was just thinking of it and I kind of blanked out on it. But it was also a really difficult one to listen to and then to bring on stage. But there's been a lot. There's been a hard one.
When you have these two completely different types of people on stage, do they ever listen to each other? Do you ever think they get somewhere, resolve anything? They just try to talk each other down? What do you see and how do you deal with that?
You'd be surprised. The one I wanted to mention, by the way, was a person in Gaza when the war first started, and he was on the run while jumping on our space, managed to get internet with his family. He was extreme, like he's no regret towards October 7th and very, very extreme anti-Israel sentiments. But obviously he's being bombed and lost members, people he knows because of the bombing. But I remember he came on stage and it was one of the most passionate spaces. I think it was the same day or the day before the pilot came on. And that was a tough one as well, knowing that he's with his family and the strikes were happening in the background. There's a lot of similar examples. Now, to your question on, does it lead anywhere? Surprisingly, almost all the time. Because I'm very strict on having, I think I've gained that respect where people know that they come on my stage to listen to both sides because we've built that brand. And surprisingly, both sides do listen to each other. And it leads to magical conversations. Obviously, it impacts the audience, and the audience is exposed to both sides, and I get a lot of messages and comments about it. I hope to take it to a bigger scale, but you'd be surprised. Again, it's underrated how much dialogue can solve in our world.
And there's Israelis listening that disagree with the Israeli pilot, and maybe there's Gazas listening that disagree with some of the people from Hamas.
Exactly. Right? Of 100%. There's people in Gaza that are anti-Hamas, and there's some people in Israel that are anti the war in Gaza. So, you got both sides, but you got factions within each side that disagree with each other. And you got extremists on each side. Now, I've had a person that wants to wipe out Gaza and a person that wants to wipe out Israel on stage together and debating. Obviously, it doesn't, some people are just too set in their beliefs and they're just, butt heads. But that butting heads allows the audience to see both sides clashing. And they don't have to change their mind, but they have to, if they just learn to listen and to be more open-minded, I think that's enough.
Maybe this is unrelated, but will this issue ever be resolved?
It's been too many decades. It's just not enough. Seeing this war, I think people just forgot that the war is still ongoing. There's people dying every day. It's, I think it's just too deep, far too deep into the too polarizing and too far down the road. It is eventually going to be resolved. Nothing can go on forever, but potentially not even in our lifetime, and not the way it should be resolved, in my opinion. But I hope I'm wrong.
So 50 years, 100 years, 500 years.
It's been going on for a long time.
I know.
If you read research the topic, it's been going on for an extremely long time. It hasn't started on October 7th. It didn't start in the 70s. It's been going on for a long time. It didn't even start in the 40s. So it's too polarizing of a topic for me to even have an opinion on, or even to not only share an opinion, but to have an opinion. It's too difficult.
Right. What are your rules in these spaces? Because I've heard you cut off people. I've heard you say, no. Now you're getting too emotional, or you're saying things. I'm going to stop you. And these are people that you've had on before. Like, I've heard you cutting people off and things. What are your rules, and how do you know when to do that? And also, how do you do that when you're on hour number 20? I mean, like, how do you stay focused? Because you are the guy that has to cut people off and enforce.
Yeah. So, and you're referring to the big polarizing spaces where they end up going on forever and get very heated. I don't have too many rules. I think the number one rule, you'd be surprised, has nothing to do with cutting people off or no swearing and stuff. Like, I don't mind swearing. I want it to be as raw as possible. It just depends on the audience's reaction, the panel's reaction. But for me, the number one rule is balance. It doesn't have to be, equal amount of speakers, but equal amount of speaking time. So we might have 3 pro-Palestinian and 6 pro-Israelis. Doesn't mean it's the imbalance is there, because I might have them both speak the same amount of time. So balance is the number one rule. That's it. Number 2 is the basics. No death threats. I've had people threaten each other on stage a lot. No death threats, and avoiding personal attacks. I don't mind if a bit of personal attacks, it just keeps the energy going, keeps it raw, but just not to get too far-fetched, because then you're moving away from the substance of the issue, and you're making it personal. No one gives a shit whether you think that person's an idiot or that person thinks you're an Israeli spy or a Hamas sympathizer. I don't care. I care about the issue and your opinion on that issue. So I try to avoid personal attacks, and I try to keep it balanced. Okay. How do I do it on hour 20? Just a lot of coffee and a lot of adrenaline, the Wim Hof breathing, for example, and things like that. Okay.
Besides Zelensky and Putin, like, what's next for you? Like, where does this go? How does this evolve? And I know the Twitter platform's evolving, and they're also talking about potentially video coming in, but will that potentially change or even ruin what you've built? Because this medium is very strange. Like you said, there's no video. It's audio only. It's as many people could be on spontaneously. It changes when you even put yourself on video. So what's next?
Yeah, I don't know. So what you're referring to is Elon. A few days ago, he told us that he's adding video feature in Spaces in the next few weeks.
So you can opt in.
Yeah. Right. That's how I see it. Or it's up to X to share it, but that's how I see it happening. I don't think it will impact Spaces, because in Zoom you can put video on. So I think that will remain the same. If anything, will make it more personal. Imagine you have someone from Gaza. Guys, look at the destruction. Or someone in Israel, the warplanes are there.
Or even seeing someone's face when they communicate.
It makes it a lot more personal. The dialogue, on a phone call is very different to face-to-face. So I think we'll have more impact when it's face-to-face. So when it's within spaces, I think it will have more impact. I think it's a great addition, but we'll see. The audience, the users will decide. Now, in terms of the video feature on X, we're using that. We did the interview with Walter Isaacson to launch our show, and then the war started, so we kind of paused that. We're starting it again. A lot of focus is placed into it, live streaming as well. And, big fans of the platform, so happy to do our part in supporting it and pushing it on all the, Vivek, for example, is doing a daily, even though it doesn't get a big audience on X, a couple of thousand live listeners, he does a daily video show, streams all his events video on X. It doesn't take much for people to leverage that platform and those features. I just don't think it's extremely different to Twitter Spaces. When you do the video show, you can't just have people randomly rock up and come up. You don't have, it's not a call anymore. It's a live stream. And I think that's a very big difference. And already seeing the adoption on video is minuscule compared to the adoption on Spaces, despite a lot of effort pushing video. So we'll be doing videos, and we already started, but Spaces is still the focus. And it's, again, the impact of it is highly underrated.
What can you tell me about Elon? What's your relationship like with him? And what's it like when Elon retweets your stuff, comes on your space? I mean, that must be kind of strange.
Yeah, it's he's been extremely supportive, and look, I can just talk about publicly. He's retweeted content he agrees with. He's credited us when we did things right, like the mutiny. We tried to cover that live, because when we covered the mutiny, we were getting information not from the news. So many times, mainstream news outlets are in our audience, and they DM us for news, their information, for sources, because we have a team that gets it from not people on the ground or these Telegram groups, the Wagner Telegram group, for example, in the war in Gaza, from the Hamas Telegram groups, or the journalists on the side, or people from Hamas. Like, we get it directly from the source, as raw as it gets. And we share it, even if it's unconfirmed, like, hey, this is unconfirmed, shared in a Wagner Telegram group, or in a pro-Russian Telegram group, or from someone on the ground. We're finding a way to confirm it, and we've been pretty accurate in it. Obviously, we don't just post anything random. It has to be a verified source. So kind of going back to your point in Elon, so when we do things right, for example, the mutiny, he brings attention to it, or when there's tweets he agrees with, comes on the space when there's a topic that he's interested in discussing. He's been on the space 5 times now. I'm grateful for it. And I think it's, I don't think he's doing me a favor. I don't think I'm doing him a favor. I think we just both believe in what the platform stands for and the impact it could have on the world. And I think we're seeing that now, like where we are and where Spaces is now compared to pre-Elon, light and day.
The Russia coup, I mean, when you guys covered that, I mean, mainstream media had nothing on you, right? They didn't even know what the hell was going on, probably even 6 hours, 12 hours later. But like, I was listening to you guys, and it was like all of this cutting edge stuff.
We announced a peace deal between Prigozhin and Putin, mediated by Lukashenko, which we almost had on our show. Oh, damn it. Almost had Lukashenko on the show, but the Belarusian president. We announced it on our space. It broke on our space because we announced it as unconfirmed. I remember I was in the space, unconfirmed, guys. It seems that peace deal is reached. All right, guys, we're getting news that the movement of Wagner troops has stopped. Guys, we're getting reports on the ground that they're turning around and going back. That was happening on the space, and all the news outlets are messaging us, hey, is this confirmed? Is this confirmed? Then later it got confirmed about 10 minutes later or so. I'm like, shit, the mutiny's ended. I'm used to it because I've been doing this for so long, but really thinking about it, it's pretty surreal that one of the most important, you got the world's biggest nuclear power, second biggest, was going through a mutiny. I remember there were planes going to there were reports and planes heading to one of the warehouses that had nuclear warheads. I think Wagner wanted to take control of that, not confirmed. And we were watching. We had military analysts watching the planes. Guys, there's an airplane heading from I think the southern Russia where Wagner, the initial base that Wagner took over, the initial region, heading from there to the nuclear warhead storage facility or whatever it was, which is concerning, but we don't know where they're heading there. Later, news kind of caught up to it. Things started leaking that, hey, there were reports of X, Y, Z, but we kind of saw those planes head there. We saw the planes head from Moscow up towards, I can't remember, up north to where Putin's home is, and then back to Moscow. And we started seeing all those movies trying to make sense of it all. So that was it lasted one day, but the repercussions, if it actually proceeded and a peace deal wasn't reached, could have changed the world we live in. And I genuinely get, like, what worries me the most is when events like this are happening, I know that on a personal level I need to prepare for it. Like, if things get worse in Russia, things escalate, if Prigozhin does take over the Kremlin, what happens next? He's more extreme when it comes to the war in Ukraine. Will things escalate there? How will the US respond? What will that lead to? I've got family in different countries. Should I prepare for it? Should I head to a safe zone? I have to think of all this and talk to my team behind the scenes while covering the war and with the world watching. I've had the same thing happen in the war in Gaza. So these are surreal moments. When it comes to the mutiny, I respect that. You know, we had a responsibility, being and I think we did a good job, otherwise the world wouldn't be listening, in covering the news breaking and saying what's confirmed, what's unconfirmed. And our hit rate in the unconfirmed news, pretty close to 100%. I think the team did an incredible job. We confirmed the first warplane, Russian warplane, that got hit by the Wagner group as they were heading towards Moscow. We confirmed we started a bit late, not essentially when the mutiny started. We started about half an hour in because we didn't know whether the mutiny is confirmed. Is that one-off? Prigozhin's a very vocal guy. And they're breaking the peace. The peace agreement was probably that's one of the biggest relief. It was just hard to believe. But and then what happened before that? Remember, that was right after an interview with the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, one of the most polarized, the Trump of Asia, the Trump of Pakistan, which is already a surreal moment for me. Because in Pakistan, to have it's like having Trump more than having Trump on his face, because Trump does public appearances all the time. It's like, I'd put it in the top 5 people that are the most important to have on stage and the most difficult to have on stage. You know, him, Kim Jong-un, Putin, etc. That's how big, or Xi Jinping, that's how big Imran Khan is and was. And then considering that there was protests in Pakistan and he was about to go to jail, he's in jail now, prior to the elections, that was a big moment for me. And for that to happen, not long after the submersible, right before the mutiny, and the mutiny happening while I have him on stage and covering the mutiny, one of the biggest events of the year, live for 24 hours and then heading to LA and everything that happened afterwards with the hit pieces. It's one of the more surreal months that I've ever had in my life.
Just real quickly before we get to the hit pieces, talk about the way you're doing kind of decentralized journalism, because it's live Twitter spaces. Yeah, you've got lots of different people contributing, but you're also sourcing all of these places from around the world where a mainstream media network would never do that.
Man, look, I have to give you credit. Man, you ask spot on questions. Exactly. Like, it is decentralized journalism. So news outlets, and I don't want to, there's a place for them. We use them as sources. They do a great job. They vet information. They have their biases, conflicts of interest. But there's a need for them in the world. They hold politicians accountable. They bring a lot of good with a lot of flaws. Remember, I'm probably one of the most vocal people or actively competing with them. But they're centralized. And as soon as you centralize something, you've got the imperfections in humanity that could impact it. You centralize censorship, great. If you have a group of people that decide, hey, this is hateful content, shouldn't be there. This is illegal content, child pornography, shouldn't be there. But what if it's, conflicts of interest or their own biases, as we saw with X and the Twitter files? When that starts to start creeping in, the biases of a human brain, then it becomes very dangerous. And I think people underestimate how censored the world we live in is. And we've both fallen victim to it. You more than I. So we've decentralized it in very interesting ways that I've never talked about, I think. Maybe once or twice on stage. Where do we get our news? We get it from various sources. We get our own, similar to news outlets, but from the audience as well. We go through the comments during a space. When we're covering the mutiny, people on the ground will send us information. My team will validate their identity. Audience members of CNN don't send them information. They listen to it. It's a one-way communication. Us is two ways. It's very easy for them to send us DM with information, images, videos, and then we verify, and suddenly we have the information raw from the source. So when we have 100 or whatever thousand people listening live, and that's without people streaming it on other platforms. I'm talking about the mutiny. There's a lot of these people that are in Russia. Obviously mine is English, so Russian speaking will probably, unless they speak English, probably not be sending us information, but people in Ukraine, people in Russia, people in the US that had information, because people from the intelligence, helping us, Murray, there's that warplane you guys missed, check it out on the map. Holy shit, we send it to our team, to our OSINT guys, the open source, open source intelligence, yeah. Open source intelligence. They analyze that information, like, holy shit, there is that plane. Then we NASA on the space. We have that from the source that we've validated. So our audience becomes a source of information. Our audience also starts to fact check us. We say something on stage that's wrong. We get DMs or comments, Murray, this is wrong. It's actually XYZ. And the same happens to our tweets. To add on to that, our audience becomes our guest. As I said earlier, people from the audience request. And I always tell people, make sure if you want to come up on stage, request, but also DM me so the team can verify you, unless obviously we see the account, we know who that is. And then we start validating people. And that's how we have a lot of our guests. A lot of them are not. So our team is reaching out. We have a massive team in the background, expensive, time consuming, that does a lot of the work, but also a lot of it is raw. So now our audience feeds us information that we validate, fact checks us, and becomes our guest. I don't think it can become more decentralized than that. And this is why it's such a fundamental shift from how news is shared right now that it's hard to compete with us. I'll give you an example. Competing with social media is impossible right now because they dominate it. Meta, Twitter, etc., TikTok. But decentralized social media, decentralized is the foundation of social media. So then if you change something foundational about a certain industry, fax and the internet, for example, fax cannot compete with the internet because it's a foundational shift of the technology that fax cannot just incorporate it into their machine. With us, we've changed the foundation of how news is shared, of how news is validated, we've made it more open source. Mainstream news, it goes against their whole business model to replicate what we do, which we're a competitor, but we're a fundamentally different form of competitor that makes it impossible for them to compete. So that's an edge that is kind of ingrained into what we do beyond the being unbiased, because everyone could try to be unbiased as well. That's something that's not easy to replicate, but it's replicatable. But not everyone could decentralize it the same way we in X Spaces did.
There's probably real comparisons from Web 2 to Web 3 here, real comparisons in blockchain and crypto and Web 3.
Exactly. I've done I do a lot of crypto events. I did one in the last couple of months in Costa Rica. We agreed on it a long time ago, so I went there and did it. And I kind of shifted the speech to talk about, you want to understand real decentralization. Well, this is a perfect example. And then if you add the blockchain to it and information comes on the chain, because then we still control what we verify, what we validate. So that we can open source it even further if we want to. And if we continue to grow, I don't want to centralize the power within my control. So I'd want to open source that aspect as well. Right.
So maybe a DAO, maybe even ownership somehow by the community. That's what's maybe missing in what you're doing.
Exactly. There's no rush in it. It's too early, but I don't want to rush decentralization to launch a token and make money. That's not even something we're discussing internally. But if we continue to grow, I don't want me to become the arbiter of truth. Even though I'm right now personally, I control the information. Yeah. I make sure that things are balanced. The I still exists. And what if I'm no longer here? What if my biases start becoming too strong as I get older? So I want to remove that I and decentralize it as much as I can.
Yeah, but you can't put the genie back in the bottle now. I mean, how do we ever go back? We can't ever go back to the mainstream way we coverage news. The next time there's a hot event in this world, I'm coming on your space. And again, now you've got the critical mass, so everyone comes to your space. I think you told me one time when we were having a private conversation, you said, look, this is, we're now way up in the top. And again, it's the winner bias. Now everyone comes to you. It's hard to have competitors there when you guys are known now as the source. And now you're going to be the ones that are going to have all the input. You're going to have the people that are checking it, in fact checking it in real time. Potentially someone could pop up and talk. I mean, how can mainstream compete with that?
Exactly. So there's other great spaces as well, but they mainly focus on a certain ideology. So the Gaza war, all the other spaces are either pro-Israeli, pro-Palestinian. So the brand that we've built is being the unbiased place And when you want to hear what's really happening, you don't care about ideologies when there's a mutiny happening. You don't care about ideologies when the war first breaks out. You care about facts.
News.
Exactly. Afterwards, you can start having the debate of should this happen, should that happen, who's behind this. But this comes after the breaking news. I focus, and I want to focus to remain, on being the unbiased source of news, and then let others cover. You want to call them competitors, great. But let other covers the different stances, and people can go into their own echo chamber. There's nothing wrong with echo chamber. It's a place where you can share beliefs and thoughts with other people, other like-minded people. But to your comparison, that's in terms of competitors. But if you compare us to mainstream news, they've done themselves, again, I don't want to put them all in one basket because some are doing a good job to the best of their abilities, but they've done such a disservice to themselves. Because the systems that they've built in the way they centralized power just makes it impossible to be unbiased and impossible to be factual. Because when they have when they have Pfizer, which represents 20% of their, I'm just making up the number 20%, their marketing budget, reach out to them, hey, we're not happy with that piece. Can you please have us check other pieces that you put out? You're no longer an uncensored, unbiased news outlet, and you're no longer sharing the truth. You're sharing someone else's truth. So it is shame. It's systemic. Is there a way is it solvable? Yes. Will it be? We'll see. I think look how much they've dropped. They're collapsing and they're still going on. So if it is solvable, when are they going to solve it? Because if there's ever a time, it's better be now, because X is just eating up their market share like crazy. I had my last hit piece done on me. No, I don't call it a hit piece. It's more of a badge of honor, but they tried to do it as a hit piece, or some did. NBC is always a hate me. So NBC did it as a hit piece. Others didn't. Is that, so we were the number one account, number one, number two on their hit piece, number one eventually. The biggest account that's covering the Gaza war. Okay. And they made a whole piece about how trying to criticize us for being the biggest account, but not having any journalistic background. Silly things. But it was a beautiful badge of honor, because the next hit piece was how there's a whole report done by some institutes, like dozens of pages, about the top accounts, which included us, the top 7 accounts. We were the only unbiased one out of all the 7. And all the others had a certain stance, except maybe one other. And all of them had a stance. We were the only unbiased one. And it was a beautiful badge of honor where the mainstream news, NBC and Gizmodo, I can't remember the others, did a whole piece on it after that report was launched, was released, about how we are the biggest news outlets and they're complaining about how we shouldn't be. That was beautiful to see. But if that's their response to what we do, putting out a hit piece and complaining about it, and there were even worse hit pieces before, and I know I keep mentioning them because they're relevant, because that's their response to us. Instead of actually changing and fundamentally changing the way they share the news before they become extinct, and we're seeing one after the other go bankrupt or start to struggle. Their viewership is just collapsing. I don't know, their biases are just too ingrained for them to act on it. But again, there's good ones, not all in the same basket, but I feel bad for them.
Well, let's talk about some of those pieces. NBC News on August 14th put out an article, probably one of the first ones, where it says a rising Twitter star boosted by Elon Musk has a past littered with broken promises, say ex-colleagues. Some nice pictures of you and Elon as well. It's a pretty detailed article where they went up and called, I guess, everybody you've done business with, which is quite a few because you've started a lot of companies, and started naming names. When this came out, what was your initial response? And then what happened afterwards?
I want you to do one thing quickly, and the audience could do the same thing. Go write my name on Google, Mario Nawfal.
Okay, let me do
and
this.
Then write after it FBI, just to see if you think this is bad. That one is crazy.
Okay, FBI.
And I want to see how much I'm thinking. How much I can share, because there's settlements that I've never talked about this publicly, so this is the first time I talk about this publicly.
So when I search Mario Nawfal FBI, I get FBI and SEC respond to complaints about Twitter audio. Let me see what else I got. Entrepreneur.
That's it. Let's click on that one, the first one.
The NBC News one.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, right.
That's their first hit piece.
Oh, so that was June 28th.
The second one was an exclusive they did afterwards.
Okay, right. Okay, so FBI and SEC respond to complaints about Twitter audio star Mario Nawfal. Okay, and that was in June.
Exactly.
Tell me about that.
So that was one of the most difficult situations I've been in at least a decade, I'd say. I know I was scammed in 2018, lost millions. That was really hard by someone close to me. Incomparable to this. because the amount of hate that originated. So I grew very quickly. I grew out of nowhere. And of course I'm going to become a target, especially when I'm unbiased, because I piss off everybody in some way. So there's spaces, there's articles, there's rumors, you know the drill.
And you're promoting X, which is run by Elon.
Exactly. This is where it gets interesting. Like, I'll give you another hit piece that's just laughable. And I think the audience is going to find this really entertaining, but also pretty heartbreaking when you see the reality of what happens behind the scenes. So let's talk about this one. So so after the Russian mutiny space, I packed my bags, didn't sleep yet. So 24 hours, I haven't slept. And before that, dead because of the Imran Khan and the submersible, the submarine space. Packed my bags to do a reality show. So there's a reality show called Killer Whales. It's the biggest reality show in crypto. And
with Scaramucci as well.
Yeah, Scaramucci's there, Rand's there.
Yeah.
And so I almost canceled it because of the mutiny. Luckily, the mutiny ended it. So then I packed my bags, immediately headed to the plane. So when I headed to the plane, I started seeing attacks on Twitter. Fine. It's just another day. I'll go on the plane and sleep. I'm going to sleep, wake up. The attacks are higher than they've ever been. Some of it I can't talk about because we've taken, there's legal things that happened that I can't comment on. But they're happening on all the different platforms. People just attacking me. And they're getting a big audience because I blew up so much on Twitter because of that mutiny. Probably the highest I've been in terms of exposure, global exposure. The Gaza war kind of rivals that because it's lasted for longer.
What do the attacks look like? Is it anonymous people saying things?
No, public.
Okay.
But
public
the attacks,
figures and media sources.
Yeah, but there's nothing to attack me on. And I mean this very humbly. Like not only have I never had, in crypto, you always have the SEC reach out to you. I've been in crypto since 2017. Everyone's had the SEC send them a letter. I had the biggest consulting firm in 2017, the second biggest in 2017. All eyes were on us back then. Not one SEC letter. Not one email from the SEC. Which anyone in crypto that was there back then, you'd understand this is very rare. I'm not saying the SEC taking action. Sending us a letter of asking questions, zero. Because we've been as kosher as they come from the beginning. I've been in business since 2012. And I built a business back then called Fruity, 2012. Got to 8 figures by second year. So it wasn't a small business around the world. Still exists today. I'm not involved in it. Haven't had one person sue me. Since 2012, not one. The only thing we've had was a fine of $10,000. We made millions a year. 10,000 Australian dollars, 8 years ago, because we discounted a product too long. That's it. That's the only, we got fined 10,000 Australian dollars, which is, less than our daily cost to the company because the product was discounted too long and I didn't know there's a certain limit. I was new in business. And there's a hit piece written on that, by the way. Elon, so I say, it's Crikey wrote it. Elon's go-to guy for news is someone that runs an Australian business. And then the whole hit piece, how I got fined 8 years ago, $10,000. How that's a really bad, it's mind-boggling. But anyway, so I don't have anything on me, thankfully. I haven't done anything I'm worried about. There's no skeletons that I'm worried about. And I spoke to PR people. I spoke to lawyers like Mario, and people that are high profile. Scaramucci gave me a lot of advice. You mentioned him. Other big names gave me advice. Like Mario, your skeletons, they're going to dig them out. But because I had nothing, they just fabricated shit. So they do a space about me being involved in the mutiny somehow, or an article comes out about me. Okay, listen how crazy this is. So this article, I'll tell you the story. The heading is FBI and SEC respond to complaints. Okay? Just imagine what that means. That means right now I can call the FBI and complain about you. Say Brian Rose is flying out to Dubai and he has a bomb on his plane, in his bag. That's a complaint. The FBI could then respond. He's like, okay, can you give me his details? That's responding to a complaint. I can make up any shit. I knew when I saw it, it's nothing. But when I saw it, I was literally, so I landed in LA, I was walking into the set. So they had a massive set. It was where Batman was filmed and all the cameras, and I had to put my phone away. 5 minutes before I put my phone away, I get a call from my show manager, Romy. She's like, Mario, a video was just released about you, or videos were released about you just now, along with a hit piece by NBC. I'm like, NBC hit piece. And she read the heading. I'm like, FBI and SEC respond to complaints. There is nothing for them to act on, nothing for them to even respond about. The title is just dumb. But then in my mind, I'm like, what shit did they fabricate to be able to get a heading on an NBC, which I liked. I didn't mind NBC. I know they have their biases. On NBC, out of all places. Like, what shit could they make up for me to be interesting enough to do a hit piece. And I had to put my phone away. And my team had to deal with that chaos. And the other judges, is like a Shark Tank show. They come to you like, Mario, because they're looking at their phone. I don't want to look at it. Mario, like, we saw the news, like, shit, I don't know how you're actually being able to film. So I'm filming the first episode of that reality TV show.
Did they think about taking you off the show? Were they
No,
nervous?
not at all. They've been extremely supportive. They did a lot of due diligence, a lot. So they knew, they were extremely supportive. Never even mentioned it. The show, so much respect. They didn't even come to me and say, Mario, we saw the news, because they know it's stupid. They've done so much due diligence before accepting me on the show. I'm coming on the next season and the next season and the next season. I met them. I love them. They love me. Obviously now all those rumors are kind of dispelled. But at the beginning, when it just came out, no one knew anything, especially when you add crypto. For people in the non-crypto space, when you add crypto and SEC and FBI, especially with Sam Bankman-Fried, which I covered, immediately people will connect the dots.
Right. Trial without a jury. You're done. You're already guilty.
And then the story, Brian, this is where it gets fascinating. So I'm trying to dissect it. I had to hire private investigators. And it took me weeks to find out how crazy the story is. The source of the story is one person. We did a whole thread on it. I'll summarize it briefly, but it's an insanely ridiculous story. The journalist has a history of being anti-Elon. Hit piece after hit piece after hit piece because of Elon. Most of my hit pieces is because of Elon. They're trying to get through to Elon indirectly, trying to find weak spots. Here I am, a guy that Elon retweeted, joins the spaces all the time. What can we find on him? Because that will discredit Elon, because I'm not that important. Everyone wants to target Elon. So as a journalist that hates Elon, by a news outlet that hates Elon, that Elon always attacks for good reason. He does a hit piece. His source was one person. In those few weeks, and we released some of those things online, in those few weeks, we managed to get a recording of that journalist admitting his source was not credible. Number one. Number two, we got evidence of the source fabricating information about politicians in the past. We got evidence of the source saying on record, everything's recordings and messages, saying on record that they fabricated the story to the FBI and they fabricated the story to NBC just to be able to get them to pay attention to me, to do something, to write about it. And they threatened someone to talk about the whole NBC story. This is all public information that I'm sharing. To talk about the SEC story, which never happened. There's nothing from the SEC. And they fabricated the call and everything else. So the SEC thing was fabricated. The NBC story they gave NBC was fabricated. And they fabricated the thing about the FBI. Now I'm like, all right, cool. They must have talked to the FBI, fabricated a story. The FBI responded saying, hey, can you share with more information? And then they dropped the case. It wasn't even the FBI that responded. It was an ex-FBI person after they contacted every single person. They spent months doing this, planning it. They contacted every single person they can on the FBI until one person responded. That was an ex-FBI person that just responded for information. Turns out there's nothing. NBC put out the story. Then they realized it's wrong. The person that the SEC story they put out, they said to NBC, it's on record. They said it. I'm like, we said to NBC, please remove the story. The NBC's like, hey, it's too late. We put it out already. They're like, I have no evidence about the SEC call. And then there's also evidence of that same person saying, I got threatened by the source, the one source, to fabricate the story about the SEC. So I'm like, this whole thing is so easy to poke holes in. The journalists admit it's flawed. The people involved admitted they're lying. It's such a flawed story that there's no credibility to it. Or, you know, when NBC puts it out, all these news outlets copy it. They all removed it. But NBC couldn't do enough due diligence about the story because they're so desperate to get clicks after the Russian mutiny space to discredit Elon. So then they promised a whole series of follow-up articles. I'm like, there's nothing to talk about. They did one article exclusive, which is the one you talked about second, all these. And that one is the stupid, I didn't even ask them to remove this. I'm not going to ask them to remove it because this for me is a badge of honor. Mario had someone that said he owed him money, $5,000 9 years ago. I don't know that person, never owed them money. Another person complained about Mario recommending something to them that didn't work out to them. Another person says another website has Mario's picture and is using Mario's picture to get clicks. But guys, if this is the exclusive you did on me after a whole hit piece about FBI and SEC, it just shows how desperate mainstream media has become. And instead of you guys changing the way you cover news, instead of you guys trying to take some value out of what we've done and implement it in what you do and become better, because there's a need for mainstream news. If they just fix the flaws that they have, they resort to discrediting and destroying someone's reputation. So in that period, when it first started, it was one of the toughest periods of my life because I knew I did nothing wrong. The attacks that came on, because now all the people trying to cancel me, they have an NBC article. So they love to shit on mainstream news, but they use it as a source to attack me. And then afterwards, I responded only once publicly with one thread that someone else put out. Yeah. I did one space about it. Since then, there hasn't been one attack on me, a lot of apologies, a lot of the articles removed, and litigation that's been settled or being settled that's kind of resolved everything. And it was a massive learning experience for me. It's an incredible learning experience that even if you did nothing wrong, it's so easy to create any narrative and try to discredit someone. And it's one of the worst things that happen. I would say to my team, I'm like, I wish I did something wrong. Then it'll be easier for me to digest this hit piece. I wish the FBI reached out to me because I did a mistake in the past. Like, at least I deserve this hit piece. But when it's all fabricated, it's one of the worst feelings that you have. Here I am covering a mutiny, trying to be unbiased, made $0. All my political shows, I've made $0 from them, all of them since the beginning. I make my money off the crypto shows, the finance shows, the AI shows. That's where we monetize. The politics one, zero monetization. We cover news. We do it unbiased, no agenda. Don't attack anyone. Don't even attack mainstream media. I'm trying to be balanced about them as well and say the pros and cons. For you guys to go as dirty as this to discredit me just because you have a vendetta against Elon Musk is just disgusting. And it changed my whole perspective on mainstream media and how dirty the game is. And again, you've been through it. That was my first. But the beautiful thing is when you have your first extreme attack that everyone thinks that's going to destroy you, thankfully it just made us significantly stronger and bigger now. Anything afterwards, it's just much harder for anyone to attack you because everything's been done. When you beat the shit out of someone and they've been through it, they still stand up, like, respect. And so we stood up after this, after that month of a lot of investigation and my one public response and now this interview. But after that one response, public response, after that, the hate has been minimal. Even after the Gaza war, where it's probably the easiest thing to cancel me on because such a polarizing topic. After that, the mutiny, a hate campaign for a month by NBC and others, it just gave us a much stronger shell and allowed us to expand even further. So it's been a beautiful badge of honor. It's been one of the hardest months of my life for me and my team. My team was distraught by this. And this just shows the disgusting side of the media. And I want to end it with this. This is the example I gave you. A journalist that writes hit pieces like this is very different to a journalist in Gaza or Ukraine right now covering the war. And they should not be mixed together.
I appreciate you talking about that. What was the result of the lawsuits?
Positive.
Okay.
I'll leave it extremely positive for us.
And are you still bitter then? Because you're very passionate about this. Are you bitter with the mainstream media?
I'm thankfully I don't hold grudges. I'm just hurt. I'm just hurt, and I realize how I've always been naive. People make fun of me always being naive. I was naive enough to never think ever the mainstream media will do a hit piece on me. If they did, it'll be something more objective because they verify. I genuinely didn't think this was one of the easiest things to verify. The easiest things to verify. That is, like, we didn't take us long for my private investigators to get all that information to discredit everything. But for the journalists to knowingly have evidence and know that the only source for the FBI story is wrong, admitted they're wrong, admitted they lied, and the source of the SEC story saying on record they were threatened to say the story, threatened, their life was threatened. I posted the recordings online. And to ask NBC to remove the story, the SEC section of the story, and for NBC not to react to this, it's just such easy due diligence. I didn't think mainstream media would do this. I know you're smiling on me now like, Mario, how naive you were. I had no idea they can be that bad, and it's just sad.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry you had to find out that way. But they literally will make things up. And so now when I read mainstream media, especially after I ran for mayor of London, I just laugh out loud sometimes because I know oftentimes 90% of those headlines have no truth, you know, and that's from big name publications. And maybe it's a desperation act because they know they're dying, and maybe that wouldn't happen 20, 30 years ago, but it's happening now. And it's
getting worse.
You got a taste of it. It's probably going to get worse as they go into the death spiral. And yet most people have the same bias you have. I mean, look, you were in independent media and you still had a bias that they somehow were right, or they somehow do their due diligence. And people think that way about television channels and anything that's printed. They always give it the benefit of the doubt. And you must have had friends and family and colleagues that love you that still questioned you on the back of a headline from NBC. is that true, Mario? Are you sure? And you never know how they really feel because they're always a little suspicious. And that probably hurts.
We shit on their viewership collapsing. You're talking about mainstream media, but they still hold clout. They still hold power. When NBC put out the story, no matter how fake it is, NBC put it out. It must be true. And all the other news outlets copied them. So I'm contemplating whether to go legal on NBC or just ignore it and just, it is what it is. It doesn't have any impact on me anymore. It's just laughable now. But it wouldn't be it's not a vendetta on my side. But it's a learning lesson, and I think that doing things like this is chipping away at their credibility. Their viewership's already collapsed. I'm talking general mainstream media. But stories like this, what's the point? What benefit did it bring them? Very little. A few clicks, fine. Yeah. It went viral, fine. But at what cost? Because I've gone back. I've responded. Poked holes at it. They were very easy to poke. They've lost that credibility. And they keep doing that. To me, to others, to bigger names, to Elon, probably one of the most obvious victims is Elon. And Elon just hits back and hits back and hits back. And their credibility drops. Like CNN is now laughing stock. CNN was respected. I used to watch CNN. CNN before is not CNN today. And they're changing. So CNN, I give them credit. They're changing. They're NBC's, I wouldn't put them in the same basket. CNN's improving significantly. Long way to go. Others are not. And they're going to disappear. And rightly so. But then you'd think that citizen journalists and independent journalists would cover that void. I'm not that hopeful. Because the same biases will exist with them. They all have their own echo chambers. They still they decide what's true and not. So, and eventually they're going to be corrupted by advertisers as well. So I'm worried that the same issue that we see in mainstream media, it's a human imperfection that can only be systemically fixed. X offers you the platform to do it, but it's on you to do it. So X removing and decentralizing censorship through community notes, which is not even this minimal form of censorship, is giving us the infrastructure to decentralize news and to fix mainstream media. And I've did a tweet on this, I think a while ago, and Elon replied to it as well because it's an important one. And it talks about how I'm worried that citizen and independent journalism does not become the solution that we're all hoping for. And I'm trying to play a part in showing this by doing things the right way. And I hope more people do that. I think it will be an improvement because at least the audience is able to determine what's true and what's not, and to be able to fact check through community notes, which is not perfect, but it's a massive step ahead of having a bunch of people in a boardroom decide what's true and what's not.
Yeah. Well, then let me take this opportunity to then move into something I wanted to talk to you about that's quite related. Is blockchain the solution? Is some type of a public ledger of truth the solution? Not only we can talk about finance, we can talk about voting, but is it also potential journalism or potential social media networks where everyone can see everything somehow? A trustless system.
Yes. So blockchain, the whole concept of blockchain and the concept of we're talking about citizen journalism is one simple thing, is decentralizing power. So whether you're talking about finance, decentralizing the power that the US dollar holds on the world's financial system, or decentralizing decision-making through DAOs, or decentralizing news through what we're doing and having a ledger for truth, because people still trust what news we put out. What if we can make that transparent? Like we thought about having our news group where there's like news shared every few seconds in our private groups, have that open source where everyone has access to it. So we've considered that, for example. These are small baby steps towards something more long-term, like a ledger for the truth. It's all about decentralizing power. And this is an experiment. But it's an experiment that I think would go well if you look at history. Historically speaking, even now, if you look at examples in today's world, the more democratic a country is, the more, the better the economy is, the better the lifestyle is, and the more centralized power becomes, North Korea being the most obvious example, the worse off they are. There's exceptions like China, but how is that sustainable? We don't know. China's somewhere in the middle, not North Korea, but definitely not Western Europe or the US. So democracy as a concept is the best case study. It hasn't existed for too long, right? So everyone thinks democracy has been around for centuries. No, it's not. It's an experiment nonetheless, an experiment that we're seeing the flaws of it as well with what we're seeing in the US. But I think the flaws are all based on centralization of power. So blockchain, similar to democracy, is an experiment on decentralizing the financial system. It's decentralizing decision-making. It's decentralizing gaming. It's decentralizing the metaverse, living in that virtual world. It's decentralizing many aspects of our life. And it seems to be working, but it's way too early to tell. There hasn't been any massive use case. I mean, the first use case, which is completely unrelated to this, is gaming. For me, is an obvious use case. Because now a game, if you're living, those games are becoming worlds that we live in. And for people listening, it relates to the journalism we're talking about. They're becoming worlds. So people spend their day and night playing those games. But if that game goes bankrupt, if they decide to take away your account, similar to how YouTube takes away people's account, and what you've gone through is in, I cannot even put myself in your shoes. If games take off your assets from that game, it's like you're living in the US, someone comes, takes your house, takes your passport. Hey, go, enjoy life. That's how people feel like when they take away all their assets in the game, because they live in that game. So if you decentralize that aspect, asset ownership being number one, that's what the concept of NFTs are. Now you own your own asset. The same way I own, like, in the States, they can take away a lot of things, but they can't take away my clothes. Obviously, if you go to prison, that's a different story, but they can't take away my clothes because I'm wearing them. Can't take away I'm not wearing my watch today, my whoop or my phone. They're my assets with me. So if you have that same concept in a game, in a virtual world, or in YouTube, you own your video, then there's no more central entity, whether it falls apart or whether they become corrupt, that can impact what you do. And then other games can become interoperable. So now you've brought the concept of decentralization into that world. And that use case makes a lot of sense. And I think that experiment is working. And that should be a good case study for other examples of decentralization. We're a good study when it comes to journalism. Gaming is one we invest heavily in decentralized gaming. DeFi is another good example of decentralization working. But I think the next decade is going to be extremely important, especially with ETF approval and now Bitcoin getting mainstream adoption like never before. It's going to speed up that transformation in the world we're experiencing. And I think people don't understand how fundamentally impactful blockchain could be. Disclaimer. Everything I just said in the last few minutes could be clipped and used in a decade to make fun of me. Why? All of this could fail. The same way Web 1.0 was meant to decentralize the internet, but then the world became more decentralized with the big tech companies, Google, Meta, now TikTok, Amazon, centralizing our life like never before. Yeah. So the internet, which was conceptually is meant to decentralize our world, it led to more centralization. There's that risk with blockchain, even though it's fundamentally designed to decentralize various aspects of our life. Human greed and human imperfection could lead to more centralization that we've seen. And we're seeing already indicators of that. So that worries me. And we'll see whether humans could function with decentralization, and what level of decentralization can we function in with blockchain, with democracy, and decentralized journalism, and other forms of decentralization. But it's a scary time. It could lead to an incredibly improved world or a scary world.
And this is your business, like you said. This is kind of how you monetize IBC and your Twitter spaces that talk about blockchain. I mean, we're kind of on the cusp of something that could be really exciting here. I mean, pretty soon, like, my dad and mom in their 70s could have Bitcoin exposure. I mean, that kind of is mind-blowing via an ETF in their pension fund or their retirement or their IRA. I mean, this next bull run or this next 5 years, I mean, are you excited for it? Do you think a lot of value is going to be created? Are you going to be doing a ton of business in this space?
Most of my focus, I'm a business person, even though I'm very public on the journalism side.
Yeah, it's hard
I'm
to tell.
Passionate about politics. I tend to focus a lot on my company and my business. That's really my core. And it cannot talk about how excited I am. Like, I've got that massive opportunity where we have world leaders wanting to come on the show, reaching millions of people and covering important events. So I've got that massive opportunity that we're tripling down on, and it's growing rapidly. But my heart is still within crypto and blockchain. And that's the same. I've said the same thing in the bear market when everyone's giving up on the industry, and I could continue to say the same thing now. The ETF approval might be cool news for anyone that's not deep into crypto. Great news for anyone that's been in the space for 3-5 years. Mind-boggling for anyone that's been in the industry for a decade. People like to say the ETFs is 15 years in the making. So you're talking about an asset class that no one, just looked like a complete scam and everyone ignored, that was worth nothing, to now being the most successful ETF launch in ETF history, with billions flowing in, with BlackRock leading the way. BlackRock, Larry Fink leading the way.
He said, quote, "It's an asset that protects us." Michael Saylor tweeted that out. Bitcoin is an asset that protects us.
And that's Larry Fink saying it.
Isn't that amazing?
I cannot, it's hard to, like, if you're not excited about crypto right now, if you're outside the industry, I don't know what the price will do. I have no idea, and I never do. But my bet is on an incredibly good year and good 2 years for the industry, and where my incubator is incubating projects left, right, and center. We just take tokens. We don't take cash, mostly because I believe in the industry so much. So most of our balance sheet is just tokens and equity. That's how passionate I am about the space. We have various shows in the crypto industry. It's one of our biggest shows, and I just think that people follow price though, and I think the world's not going to be excited now. If and when Bitcoin hits 100, 200K, suddenly everyone's talking about it and everyone is going to message me about it. It's already happening. Bear market, everyone makes fun of me being crypto. Bull market, everyone's messaging me, asking me advice on the industry. It happens every time. But I think this time's going to be very different. Ran, my co-host, calls it, I think Scott calls it the same in our show. He says this is going to be, and Kyle, we talk about Kyle Chesse, they all say it. It's going to be potentially the last bull market like previous bull markets, because now it's becoming institutionalized, especially if we get an ETH ETF, but also the biggest. Because we've talked about the herd is coming since the 2016, 2017, everyone's talking about the herd is coming. This is the herd. The ETF is exactly what a herd looks like. And we're going to witness what a herd is. So exciting times, and we're extremely bullish. And from a business side, quadrupling down.
I can't believe when you tell me your real passion is business, when I just saw you speak passionately for an hour about journalism.
It's business, and I'm very passionate about news and politics. There's just a lot of baggage that comes to it, a lot of pain that comes to it, a lot of liability that comes to it. I like to live a peaceful life. I like to wake up in the morning knowing that I have nothing to worry about. I said that I've never had a civil lawsuit. It's because I've always done things right. I've said no to a lot of opportunities, especially in crypto, because I never want to wake up in the morning worried about, is this going to happen? Am I going to have a problem this? But when I got into the news and politics world, that's been my life every day. Waking up with anxiety because of the attacks that I'm facing, talking about that month of hell after the mutiny, or having to deal with the drama of the Gaza war, or having, when we broke the news on the debt ceiling, the agreement reached on the debt ceiling, and then having a lot of politicians, people in the Senate, didn't know about it until we tweeted about it and talked about it in our space. So the news broke on our space, and then having them criticize us publicly, how spaces is a risk to our democracy because of how information leaks on there, or having, financial regulators talk about spaces as a risk to our financial system after the Silicon Valley collapse and how quickly we covered the news. I just don't want that headache. I'm willing to deal with it. Like, it's a fight. I'm taking head first. But it's just such a tough thing, where my business side is something I've been doing behind the scenes. I do my biohacking every day and run my company, jump on my calls. It's a much more peaceful life. And it's like I run two lives. One of them that requires, dealing with drama, hate, attention, death threats, security risks in different countries. That one life of mine. And then another one where it's like business meetings, behind the scenes, jumping on calls with the team, closing deals, and making money. So it's like two different lives. I'm in the middle. Probably because of all the hate that I face, I'm kind of leaning to more the business one. I just want a peace now. Yeah. But as soon as the Gaza war, I kind of jump back in this side, because I have a responsibility to cover a very, very important topic and bring attention to something that no one's bringing attention to it the way we do it. So it's kind of yo-yoing. And I'm sure I'm going to go back to this side when all hell breaks loose in the US elections this year.
Yeah.
So this is constantly shifting. So this is going to be a weird one because the bull market, I expect a massive bull market, which has already started. It's going to suck up my energy on the business side, which everything blows up. Bull market, everything 20x's. And, one day you're making 10,000, suddenly 10,000 becomes 200,000 because of everything's inflated. But at the same time, I have to cover the US elections and everyone's biased, everyone's polarized, and the US is just they're being indicted left, right, and center, and the Hunter Biden having a committee hearing. So it's going to be a crazy year for me, and I've got an incredible team to hopefully have me cover it, but the responsibility is a lot on my back. So let's see if I get more hit pieces when the US elections comes in. And hopefully that doesn't distract from my business, because I hate when that distracts me from that or impacts my business, because my business has nothing to do with the war in Gaza, nothing to do with the mutiny, but people like to conflate the two.
Yeah. I think with business, you're able to create something, and build on something. And that's probably really fulfilling, which is probably why the journalism will never fulfill you, because that will always be, okay, they need you over there, but you're not creating something. And entrepreneurs create. But now you're probably going to leave this dual life for a while.
And what hurts me the most? It used to hurt me the most. I had a CryptoPunk as I was doing my spaces until before Imran Khan, before the mutinies, when I changed it. Really late. That's when crypto was in shambles.
As your profile pic, you had a CryptoPunk, right? And that was intentional.
Exactly. I just wanted to, because I was first deep in crypto, but I kept it, even though everyone's telling me to remove it, because I thought it is good awareness to the industry when someone from crypto, a crypto degen, if you want to call me, because owning a CryptoPunk is deep into the industry, was talking about wars and important world events and shaping different narratives. Yet, what hurts me is that in crypto, we're an investor, so we invested in a lot of projects. We've incubated projects, never had any issues, and no civil lawsuits, nothing shady that I've done in my life. I've just been so above board and everything. I've never hit anything. I use one wallet. So anyone that doesn't understand crypto, if you have a wallet, everyone can see your transactions, yeah? For anyone that doesn't know. And every investor uses different wallets for different investments because they don't want anyone watching them. I had one wallet. I had my name in that wallet. Everyone knows my wallet. It's very public. And we used it, the company wallet, for all transactions. I never hid anything. I think it says, now it's different because after the hate. So complete transparency here. Everything's on chain. No one's ever taken any blockchain transactions and attacked me for them because there's nothing wrong we've ever done. That's how transparent it's been. And I came from crypto and I'm having that impact on the world. I kept my CryptoPunk as respect for the industry. And what was hurtful is that in the early days of the hate, it's changed now finally. In the early days of the hate, instead of the crypto community rallying behind someone from crypto covering those world issues, whether it's jealousy and spite and having someone from crypto blow up to that level, instead of having come in and support, yes, someone from crypto covering those world events with a CryptoPunk, it just shows that it brings attention to the industry. And, politicians, senators coming and talking to a CryptoPunk, they don't know what a CryptoPunk is until they ask me on stage, hey, what's that picture? And the crypto community was leading the hate, especially during that hate period. They were leading that campaign of hate. That bothered me so much. I'm like, fuck this, sorry for cursing. So screw this. I removed my CryptoPunk. I put my photo since. It was the right decision because it just allowed me to cover the mutiny and cover world events. I can't talk about the war in Gaza with a CryptoPunk. It's hard to be taken seriously with Israeli military or people from Hezbollah on stage talking to me. They don't know what this ugly picture is. So it was for the better. But one thing that bothered me is that I have those two worlds and I do one for money that I'm deep in, but I did do one for that did not get me a return, but I did it because I thought it brought good to the world. And then that world, instead of supporting me, did the opposite. So that bothered me a lot. It lasted a few months.
What did they say?
Look, I can't. So there's some things I want to talk about because the legal case. Look, there was nothing they could really say because there's nothing that I did. You'd have the credible voice. There's credible voices in crypto. They never attacked me because there was nothing on chain. The ones that actually care about evidence never attacked me because there's nothing on chain. I've shared all blockchain transactions. Our portfolio is all public. I don't know anyone in crypto as transparent as us. No fund as transparent as us. So there's nothing really concrete, but it's just jumping on the bandwagon, whatever it is. So the first attack was pump and dump. And they would put projects that we pump and dump. That was one of the first attacks that people use. I'm like, guys, here's the transaction about every single project you mentioned. All of them. We hold 70, 80, 90, 100% of those tokens. They dumped because all the market, 100% of tokens dumped. We hold all our tokens. So, because the SAFs is a lockup period. So we lost money. So that investment was worth 10 million for us. It's dropped by 95% because of the rest of the industry, or 99%. It's now worth $50,000 for us. We lost $9,950,000. How is that a bad thing? So that was one of the first attacks. That was just dumb, especially for the crypto community to jump on that bandwagon. The pump and dump one people love to use. And it works for people that don't understand crypto. Right. For anyone that has time to look at the transactions, like, all right, cool. These are investors. They lost money like everyone else. The projects that pump and dump dropped like the rest of the industry. Everything dumped. The whole industry. It's nothing to do with us. That's probably the main one. And then they jump on any bandwagon.
Right.
So there's rumors about me being some spy. The rumor is always relevant to what topic I'm covering. So in Silicon Valley Bank collapse, Mario's involved in the financial system XYZ way. With the war in Gaza, I'm a Hezbollah spy. I'm an Israeli spy. These come a lot. Like, I'm a spy. I'm a foreign agent. These happen a lot. It's one of the dumbest ones. I'm not allowed to go to the US. I'm like, guys, I'm in the US right now. I'm not allowed to go to the UK. I have a company in the UK. I have a team in the UK for one of my companies. Not allowed to go to Canada. Apparently there was attempt to apparently assassinate me in Canada that leaked a couple of weeks ago. There's a company I helped co-found that went public in Canada, and I might take my company, my current company. We're working on potentially going public in Canada and the US. So there's very dumb rumors, but everyone just kind of jumps on them.
And you kind of hope that the crypto community might back you a little more because you're in there. And
it's changed now. I think after the mutiny one, it's changed. Everyone's like, okay, maybe, because when you get attacked for something and he's still standing, everyone looks like, all right, these attacks probably don't have any credence. Otherwise, there'll be more news about the FBI. There'll be more news about the SEC. There'll be a lawsuit. Someone sued Mario, anything. I sued others. I have never still to this day received any communication from any governmental organization whatsoever other than them wanting to come on the show. And there hasn't been anything released. All the credible people online that call out scammers, none of them have called me out because they know that they need evidence. Apparently they do more due diligence than NBC by the looks of it.
And also, you've never publicly talked about this, which there's good to that, because sometimes when you publicly comment, you amplify. I had this issue in the past when I was running for mayor. Someone would say something and it would just burn me up. But if I commented on it, someone would say, oh, really? So if you address a pump and dump, people say, oh, pump and dump, let's talk about that. And then that becomes a meme, it goes viral. And then before they hear the facts, now you've just amplified that. So I think that was really disciplined of you not to react. You wrote that one thread and then you let it lie. And now you're addressing it in a piece of long form video where people can get the whole story. They can also feel your energy. And that's probably the right way to handle something like that.
Yeah, I made the mistake you made. When I first got attacked, I went public and responded. It only made it worse. Like, people never cared about I'm like, guys, so for example, the on-chain transactions, it's like the most credible evidence you can offer for it. People just ignore that and attack you for other things. Oh, he's responding. He said this. Does he mean that? He's lying about this. I'm like,
it's amazing.
Shit, like it's insane how little people care for truth when they want to cancel you. It's mind-boggling. And the mutiny one is when the NBC hit piece. That one I didn't respond for a month. First to get all the facts, because it was months in planning. So it took me a while to get all the recordings, all the evidence, put it out into a thread. And then we put out the thread. And the one response, the only reason I had to respond eventually, because it was way too big. So when something's all over the place, you kind of put in a position where you have to respond. Otherwise, people assume it's true when you're always quiet. You know, Hunter Biden doesn't talk publicly. It doesn't do him any favor because it's all over the news. But if something's small and you ignore it, it just means it's too small to worry about. But that one I responded to. The response was so detailed. It's a very long thread. It was one space. It's such a detailed rebuttal of all the points in so much detail. Since then, it's mind-boggling how quickly hate disappears. No one's mentioned it again. Zero mentions of it again. It just disappears like it never existed. It's insane how the human brain works. People just move on, like, shit. No apologies, nothing, rarely apologies. People move on. It's like nothing happened. Lucky I don't hold any grudges. So all the people that were kind of on top of, like, using that hate to attack me, never attacked them back. They're still welcome to my stage. I don't hold grudges. I know that don't hate the player, hate the game. But you have to know when to respond and when not to respond. And it's a very, very delicate thing. And I played it right with the mutiny. I played it wrong with the initial attacks after the FTX. Started with the FTX spaces. Okay. That's the first attacks. Right. And every time I have a big space, I know I'm going to be attacked. Surprisingly, the guys at War One brought small attacks that no one cared about anymore. It's like, oh, we've seen this again. All right, another day of attacking Mario. People have moved on by it. And there's nothing left to make up about me. Now I think the foreign agent one is gaining traction. It gained traction and died down because they're stupid. So yeah, I know next time there's going to be the Trump drama, and we cover that as always, or some other war happens and we cover that. It's going to be a new round of hate, but every time it's just getting better and better.
And you get better at dealing with it as well.
I get better at dealing with it, and people starting to give less and less shit about all this hate, because it's like every time now there's a new hit piece on Trump, love him or hate him, people are like, yeah, and it's another hit piece. It is what it is. So you kind of become immune to it for you personally, but in the eyes of the public as well. When they see you attacked so much, they're like, oh, Elon's guy, or they call Elon's guy, or Twitter's guy, or the X Spaces guy is getting attacked again.
It's actually built Trump's base, and it's given him free media, that the media is now agreeing that he gets great media when now the media covers his trials that helps him in his election, and he gets more fans.
They did me a favor.
Yeah.
The mainstream media, so everyone liked the narrative of mainstream media attacking me, canceling me. I'm like, guys, people are like, mainstream media is trying to destroy Mario before the mutiny, before the NBC hit piece. I'm like, guys, it was a great story. I could have gone with it, but I'm fact-based. I'm like, guys, I don't think so. I don't think they care about me. They asked me for news. I've been very amicable with all news, including NBC, but other journalists. I have a lot of journalists. But then after that hit piece, I'm like, all right, guys, you did, that journalist does not represent all of NBC, disclaimer. So that journalist did mainstream media a massive disservice, because now it's impossible to say mainstream media is not trying to bring me down when there's all these silly hit pieces on me based on no facts. I'm like, all right, guys, I tried to back you up a bit, but you just shot yourself in the head. Is
all press good press?
No.
But most of it is.
It depends if you play it right. But we're both on the winning end of a hit piece. Those people get attention. I think there's a lot of people on the losing end of hit pieces that people just forget about them. Their reputation is eternally destroyed. And I think, it's just sad to see journalists not take their responsibility seriously, not understand that what they put out there could genuinely destroy people's lives. Like what it did to you and your family, and I'm assuming here, when you went through your first round, what it did to me and my team is just, I don't know how they could do that to people. I would feel so guilty if I ever put out a piece that impacted someone that way. If it's not based on truth, even if it's based on truth, I'd feel guilty, let alone fabricated. And my heart goes out to all the people that were negatively impacted, indefinitely negatively impacted by a journalist with a vendetta, or a journalist chasing clicks or clout.
That's the thing. They're chasing clicks and they're almost out of a job, and they get immune to it. They get desensitized to it, and it just becomes another number, another headline, and they crank it out.
And they move on to the next one.
And they get to keep their job a little bit longer, and they stay relevant on a tail to where,
Sometimes they make it personal. Like the journalist against me was adamant to make as many stories about me as possible. Only came out with that hit piece, like, I'm going to do so many more. Then only came out with one exclusive, empty as hell, zero hate after it, because it was one of the dumbest pieces I've ever seen. But he was posting about me, he's trying to go into spaces to talk about me. But this is no longer a journalist. This is someone on a vendetta. He was doing the same to Elon. Do a piece based on facts, but he's not passionately trying to bring someone down. And that was nothing but nice to him to this day. I'm not mentioning his name, for example, because I don't want to bring him down. To this day, I'm not doing that. I'm like, why? What is triggering? This is human stupidity. You have a responsibility as a journalist, as an arbiter of truth, to an extent, as a reporter of truth, not as an arbiter of truth, as a reporter of truth, and have the powers of an arbiter of truth, rightly or wrongly. And take those responsibilities seriously. Don't use it to feed your hate towards someone. I don't know how the hell Elon deals with it to that level, but I'm sure it gets to him sometimes.
Oh yeah, I've heard him talk about it, and even recently.
Emotional about it as well.
Yeah. And I mean, again, so he was on Rogan recently and Friedman, and he was talking about a bunch of the cases against him. And most of the public don't even know the truth behind, the case, the SEC's case against him, and some of the jury trials of Tesla. And he's just like, no, this is what actually happened. And even people that know the story were blinded by some of those headlines. And so, this happens regularly to lots of people around the world. And people remember the headline. They don't remember the retraction.
Exactly. And I think people that are listening to this, and this applies to me, but everyone else has been target of a hit piece. It impacts us a lot more than you think. It impacts the most powerful, the strongest of us a lot more, especially the first one. Then we become immune to it. But keep that in mind when you're trying to cancel someone. It happens a lot in crypto. It happens in everything. People try to cancel each other in politics all the time. Just try to cancel each other all the time. You're impacting someone's life and livelihood. And I'm not talking about me here. I'm past this stuff. I don't give a shit anymore. But others that are coming out, I see that happen all the time. We bring everyone on stage. You know the amount of people we get attacked for bringing someone on stage? Why are you giving them a voice? Don't give them a voice because of X, Y, Z stupid reason. I'm like, hey, that's something important to say. And you want to shut them up. You want to remove their right to speak about a topic they know something about because of something in the past or because of some rumor about them. Powerful people reach out to me to try to cancel people. Powerful people that I could have repercussions not listening to them. I don't listen to them. It's just sad the world works with. Don't be part of that cancel culture. And that cancel culture is just growing so quickly, especially with social media and how quickly you can spread news. Yeah. And it's just sad, and mainstream media is becoming part of it. Like the way they cancel someone they don't like or they see as a competitor or as a threat. Elon being, again, the most obvious example.
Are you going to have Trump on one of your spaces this year?
Yeah, I hope so. We're in discussions and I hope we can have him on soon. I want to get Kanye on too. He's very polarizing. I like polarizing people, and I also like putting him on with people I disagree with. You know, Elon and Alex was like the perfect example. But having someone like Kanye and someone from the ADL, imagine that.
Yeah. Is Kanye back on Twitter? No.
Yeah. I don't know if he got banned again, but he's back now.
He's back.
Probably, I don't know. Maybe he got banned again last few days. But he's back a few weeks ago.
So he's back. So you want to keep putting people together in these spaces and just keep giving people access to the source of info. And that's what you want to do, at least for this year. Election, it's going to get crazy. There's going to be more misinformation, disinformation. So
especially with AI now. It's crazy.
I know. Are you going to, I guess, well, let me finish this. I want to ask you a couple personal questions. Are you worried? Well, let me ask this, Mario. When will you be duped by an AI voice on your Twitter spaces?
That's a good one. I think it's too early for that, but in a few months it won't be too early. We've been duped by fake AI generated information. We duped to a certain level. We never ended up posting it. But I think very soon it's going to be true. I have been duped for a few seconds as a joke. Luckily, someone came up. It's someone I know, but they used AI. His name is Justin Hart. He used AI to say something. I'm like, shit, Justin Hart saying this stuff? Turns out he put it through AI trained to use his voice to say something. And they're like, guys, that was an AI speaking. I'm like, holy shit, I couldn't tell for the first few seconds. So, yeah, but I think it's going to be easier for someone to dupe us with an anonymous accounts happen to us. Anonymous account that pretends to be credible underground to come up and speak. So it's like verifying, especially on Twitter. When it comes to wars and stuff, a lot of people do things anonymously. That anonymity mixed with AI, it's going to become a shit show. So I think our responsibility of verifying information is going to become more and more important. And people love us to make a mistake because they can jump on us. Yeah. So we're very, very, very careful to kind of balance it out where we don't censor too much, but at the same time we vet information to make sure we don't get tricked and our audience doesn't get tricked.
Okay. And guest-wise, at least Twitter's verified the account. So you got an extra layer of security. If, say, Elon comes on or Alex Jones comes on, it's less likely someone's going to manufacture that to an AI voice if you have the Twitter verified.
Exactly. But then accounts getting hacked, like the SEC not taking their account seriously, and what happened with the ETF.
We'll see something this year.
There's going to be a lot of craziness, a lot of concerns about AI, and I think a lot of big social media companies will be held liable in many ways. There'll be a lot of lawsuits now when it comes to this election. And there will be a lot of misinformation and disinformation. I think it's going to be a crazy, crazy world we live in over the next couple of years as AI controls a bigger and bigger part of the narrative.
Yeah, it's going to get dicey and spicy. Tell me about you. You say you're an introvert, which people can't believe because you are probably known and do more media than most extroverts. You also spend a lot of time with longevity, with biohacking. That's a big part of how maybe you can stay optimized for 20 hours. You know, tell us a little bit about you. How do you decompress?
My life is very interesting. So I don't know if you want to call it introverted. I use the word introverted, but I'm very private. So I don't mind going to big dinners, speaking on stage. I'm very comfortable with it, but I just don't like it. I like that lifestyle. So maybe it is introverted. I like the lifestyle of being private and making decisions behind the scenes. Again, difficult to believe considering where I am, but it didn't plan any of this. In terms of my daily life, it's a fascinating day. I spend every day 4 hours just biohacking, 7 days a week. I think It's a whole different discussion. I know you're very deep into that world as well, and we're both very deep into it. But I find anyone that is blessed to have financial security, there's nothing more important to spend time on than your health and trying to live as long as possible. So a lot of my money goes to that. A lot of my time, more importantly, goes to that. So I run my business while sitting in a hyperbaric chamber or doing red light therapy or an infrared sauna or on a PEMF machine or...
you do Twitter spaces while you're in the infrared sauna.
A lot. They make fun of me all the time in the spaces because I do the daily space with Rand and Scott, and they make fun of me. Mario, what are you doing now? Which sometimes there's a bit of a sound, etc. I'm like, brrr, with the engine or something. Mario, where are you now? What chamber are you sitting? What crazy weird shit are you doing now? So yeah, I do that on a regular basis, and it's kind of my passion on the side. And I do it out of necessity. Who doesn't fear dying, especially when you're not religious, so you accept the unknown, which is even scarier. So I try to delay as much as I can the concept of dying. And scientifically speaking, we're getting closer and closer to being able to pause aging, and we're slowing it significantly already to get to a level where we pause it and reverse it. So it's moving very quickly. If I'm lucky enough to get to delay my aging to a level where I can pause it and then pause it long enough and not get killed by like a bus hitting me, to get to a level where I can reverse it, maybe I can live a fair bit longer than everyone else. Far-fetched, but it's kind of my little thing. That's how I deal with the unknown. It's like, maybe I can prevent it. And that's how I run my business. So this is my daily life. People think I'm doing meetings all the time. I do interviews, rarely do interviews, almost never do meetings. I can't remember the last meeting I did. Every day I wake up. Now I'm doing this, but generally I wake up, go do biohacking for 4 hours while doing my running my business, do the show, likely while biohacking, come back. I used to dance as a hobbyist. I used to dance a lot. I haven't for the last year, but I used to maybe dance a bit.
What was your dance?
Bachata. So I used to be a bachata artist. So I would travel to events around. One reason I had stopped is security. I was in Ukraine before the war dancing. I traveled to Turkey. I traveled around the world dancing, the US. As an artist. So that means they advertise me everywhere. Mario Nawfal coming with my dance partner. I'll be on stage, people coming in to watch me dance.
Wow. What is bachata?
Bachata is like a Latin dance with like a guy and a girl dancing. It's very sensual.
Like tango or salsa?
Similar to tango, but more modern, more sensual.
Okay.
So that's a lot of people, the first exposure to fame or kind of small amount of fame was in the dance world, dancing community as an artist. But I couldn't do that because when I go to a country now and they advertise me, Mario Nawfal coming, I can't go there discreetly. Now it's okay in the UK and Germany and France, it's fine. But if I have to go to the countries and hot zones right now and there's a festival and I'm all over the place coming, people, it just becomes very tricky. 2 reasons. The whole political world I'm in, but the crypto world I'm in as well. Anyone in the crypto world just has to be more careful. The whole concept of a private key. I had a lot of my VC friends threatened, kidnapped, going in a restaurant and then people with guns sitting there waiting for them in the last few years. One of my very close friends, end of the year before, not last year, so about a year and a bit ago, got kidnapped in Mexico, a big VC, for days and got out. So, that adds more fear. So the crypto aspect to it, and now adding all the spaces and all the death threats, it's hard to go out and dance on stage as a hobby. So I dance more now discreetly here when I can. But that's my life, man. Biohacking, running my business, doing a show when my life pauses when there's a major war or something. I pause everything and I have a responsibility to stay on for as long as it takes to cover those important topics. And I do those personally when it's like a major breaking news events. My team supports me, but I do those personally considering the importance of it. That's my life, man. The life of an introvert thrown in front of the camera.
Sounds awesome. 2034, 10 years from now, what does your life look like? Is it different? Is it bigger? Is the media bigger? Is the blockchain bigger? Has your life changed? Are there Mario Juniors running around?
Look, my goal is to be less of a... I'll just use... What's that? I forgot the name. I'm just going to use the worst example, but Rupert Murdoch. So my life is going to be less like, in a New Zealand called like Joe Rogan, for example, more than Rupert Murdoch is the only name I can think of, but someone who runs a news network. Again, Rupert Murdoch is the worst name to kind of compare
yourself
to. Yeah, exactly. But what's that show that's made behind...
Succession?
Succession, the main guy there. So it's like, I want to be the guy that builds the network, facilitates it behind the scenes, and I have different people leading it in different departments. So I want to be the platform. I want to be able to have... So I want to become the platform for uncensored news and bringing different polarized sides together. That's ideally, of course. If I achieve that, I'd be very grateful. I want to be able to have real impact. The perfect epitome is having Putin and Zelensky on a table. That's like if you want to imagine the place I want to reach, would be to that level of Xi Jinping and Taiwan president meeting together. So the Palestinian prime minister and the Israeli prime minister sitting there. So meetings that change the world we live in to that level. So that would be like the ideal goal, the ideal mission. While in the crypto community running one of the biggest incubators, while still looking the same because biohacking is working and my health improving. So that's like the ideal life I want to have and live a peaceful life with no drama. It would probably be a mix of all things. I don't think I'll get to a level where I can get Putin and Zelensky on a table together, but I'm going to try. I don't think my life's going to be drama-free, that's for sure. And I don't think that biohacking is going to keep me looking like this and feeling like this forever. But if I do, that would be great.
I like that. Do you think we will live in a future where someone in the media can literally make a change that'll change the world forever? Like, we've never really seen a figure like that could bring people together. Do you think that we will?
I think we're seeing mini versions of that already. Joe Rogan, which you mentioned earlier because of his interview with Elon, is one of such examples, Lex Friedman, etc. I'll use Joe Rogan as an example. He's given voice, the mic, to people that have never had the opportunity to speak or that were censored. And that is having an impact. That is opening. The pandemic is the perfect example. If not for shows like Joe Rogan's, like yours, and like others, we would be living in a very different world than where we live in today. The amount of censorship that happened during COVID, again, I understand the craziness of when it first came, the confusion. We never dealt with a pandemic like this in a very long time. But at the same time, like, to see censorship, they now know they can achieve such control and censorship. When I say they, it's people in power, not some secret society. I'm just politicians and organizations and governments and wealthy people. So they've realized how much influence they can have and how much control they can have because they did it during COVID. What's to stop them what's to stop this from happening again? Well, it is shows like Joe Rogan, like what I do on a smaller scale and like what others do. And that is already having an impact on the world. Can someone or a group have a bigger impact on the world? Yes, there's been a lot of interviews that have had impact already. A lot of influential people over the decades that were interviewed by mainstream news and their voice was heard. But I think it could be taken a step further. I think if news outlets could build, like, which Western news outlets are respected by Russia? Which Russian news outlets is respected by the US? It makes it very hard for one of them to bring both sides together. But I'm grateful that people from Russia and people from the US, politicians from both sides, come on my show. So if more people do what we're doing and bring both sides together and whatever the topic is, then you can actually take it a step further. Then you can have not only one influential person having a voice on your show like Joe Rogan or mainstream news over the decades, but you have two influential voices coming together and speaking. They might speak behind the scenes, but meetings like in WEF, in the World Economic Forum, I think that was the first time that Mandela met with the South African Prime Minister or something like that. It was the first time, or I could be wrong, or it could be first time a delegate from the Palestinian Prime Minister or Yasser Arafat met someone from the Israeli side, something along those lines. I think that was it. At the World Economic Forum, behind the scenes, I'm like, what if you put meetings like this at the forefront publicly? And then it just makes all their followers, it just makes it much easier for them to reach a deal behind the scenes when publicly they're seen speaking and the world could digest a deal reached between Palestinians and Israelis, or a deal reached between Ukraine and Russia, or Taiwan and China. Things done more transparently. So I really want to play a bigger role to achieve that, hopefully.
I think you will. Final thoughts from you, and also any final advice to citizen journalists out there, young men and women that are inspired by this story, that want to create this on some level.
Yeah, so citizen journalism is blowing up on X. I think Elon's talked about it. He mentioned it. That's what the term was coined after the FTX space when he called it citizen journalism. And he's used that term multiple times afterwards. And there's a lot of people that are doing it. They're doing an incredible job and doing things like, going on, like I don't go on the ground yet. I just do things I don't think I need to. There's people going on the ground and covering different situations. My advice to them would be, first, keep doing it. Like, this is great. But do not fall victim to the same biases and flaws in the systems that built the mainstream media that exists today. Don't let advertisers dictate what you say. Don't let your biases stand in the way. Or if you're biased, say you're biased. Say your stance. Don't pretend you're unbiased. so people understand this is your stance. And then I think more citizen journalists trying to be unbiased would be perfect. I just don't know how they could do it. I don't know how they could do it sustainably long term. I'm doing it, but that's because I can fund myself with the business side. Right. I don't need advertisers. That's because I've been like this. My personality has been unbiased already since I was a kid because of my personal experiences. So, but not everyone has that. Everyone has their biases. Everyone lives in a certain environment. Someone in the Arab world, it's very hard for them to talk about the Israeli side of the argument. Someone in the US, it's going to be very hard for them to talk about the Russians. That's why one reason I'm in Dubai, well, mainly I'm in Dubai well before all this news and mainstream media and all this spaces. I've been in Dubai since my e-commerce days, my old company for taxation purposes. And then I just enjoy living here. But luckily I'm here. It's because it's a country that it's in the middle, like it doesn't take sides and it doesn't force me to take a side. So I can be as unbiased as possible and I can give a voice to everybody. But it makes it very hard for someone to speak out against the Canadian Prime Minister while they're based in Canada or speak out against Putin. That's even worse. Speaking out against Putin while based in Russia is a lot scarier. Or speaking against Hezbollah when I'm in Lebanon or speaking against the Israeli Prime Minister when I'm in Israel. It's just much more difficult. So I don't know. It's going to be hard for citizen journalists to really achieve what we want to achieve, decentralized, transparent news. But I just want more people to do it. I think that the more attention that comes to it on a platform like X, at least we're heading in the right direction, disrupting the existing mainstream news systems that we have that are flawed.
You mentioned X. Last question. Do you think it's only a matter of time before platforms like YouTube and Facebook and Instagram have to follow the lead of X and stop a lot of the centralized censorship policies? Or do you think because they're so big, they can just hold out and do what they need to do?
They are. Surprisingly, they are. Most people don't know this. I had Mark Andreessen on my show once, and he's on the board of X, and he's also on the board of Meta. Or he was when he was on the interview. And he said to me, when Elon that was a while ago, when Elon did the verification tick, Mark goes he's like, this is an experiment. And Meta's watching very carefully. And then we saw Instagram copy it in some ways. We're seeing them be more careful on what they censor. They're seeing Twitter as a threat. Well, they have to respond. Now then the question becomes, will their biases or the flawed system or the corruption, whatever you want to call it, the conflict of interest, better than corruption, will those be too strong and decisions be made based on those rather than based on business decisions? Because business decisions, you gotta decentralize. You gotta open up your censorship. Otherwise, X is gonna eat your lunch. People are starting to see how censored those platforms are. So if they don't act now, it's gonna backfire on them. From a business perspective, they need to act.
Well, they have the advertisers still now.
Yes.
But maybe not the
advertisers
eyeballs.
without exactly.
It's trending to X right now.
Exactly. X's metrics are blowing up. So if they don't act and taking more baby steps at least, and if they're still held captive by the advertisers, by the conflicts of interest, by the internal biases, then they're going to go down the same path as mainstream media. But I think most of them are too smart for that. I think the hierarchical structure, even though it will delay this, they're going to be forced into it. And I'm already seeing small signs of it, but very, very small. And we'll see. I think they'll do it, but I think it'll be kind of too late where X is just going to dominate.
Are we ever going to see the YouTube files?
We've talked about it after the Twitter files. They're ugly files, aren't they?
Ooh.
They're ugly files.
YouTube's uglier. Yeah, it's another level of ugliness. If that ever came out, I mean, Google would probably have to write some big lawsuit checks.
Yeah.
But if Trump gets elected, who knows? Maybe he'll launch an investigation.
If there's YouTube files, we'll be covering it live, that's for sure. The team is covering the Epstein files now. We covered the Twitter files a while ago. So it only a matter. We did a few tweets on YouTube files back during the Twitter files day. There was a few leaks, but nothing in comparison to the Twitter files. So we'll see. I don't know what it'll take. It needs some sort of lawsuit or new level of ownership, or some executives kind of leaking all that information, like an Edward Snowden type leak, to get the YouTube files. But it's going to be juicy, and I think it's going to wake up a lot of people.
Yeah. I can't wait to see him. Mario, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for what you're doing out there. I think this is amazing for people to see what it takes to do what you do and be on the front lines. I don't think people have any idea the kind of hate that you get and the kind of divisiveness that creates a life that most people would run away from. And yet you're built in a certain way where you're able to sustain it. So thank you for doing that. It's a huge thing what you're doing. And you combined with a platform like X, it literally is changing the world. And I don't think that's overstating the fact. And what you did with Russia and Silicon Valley Bank, I think your coverage that weekend, it might have actually had the Fed act on that Sunday night. And without those conversations, without someone forwarding it and saying, this is happening and this is happening, they might have missed that opportunity. And that could have been a massive, massive collapse for so many tech companies. I mean, you're right on the edge, man.
It is very tricky. I knew that. All the biggest voices leading the charge, Jason Calacanis, Bill Ackman being the biggest one, Mark Cuban, they were the biggest voices. They used X as they used that space as the platform to lead that charge. And I know that eyes are on me. I know that they're on me. They're putting out that they want to hold. Not long afterwards, they talked about X and spaces and how there should be some sort of law that limits what is shared there. And there's going to be a crackdown. And I know it happened on the Senate level, in the U.S. House, and within those groups like the Fed. So I know a lot of eyes are on me, and it's very, very tricky territory. We do have a lot of incredible support, though. There's more and more people supporting free speech. And, you've been on the ugly side of it. I've seen the growth that you've had over the years and what you've achieved over the years. So you've had a lot of the voices on your show, some of the biggest voices on your show, talk about this. So we're leading a fight against something that's a lot more powerful and a lot more prevalent than people understand. And I know that I'm going to be targeted further. And it's not only on the US level. Remember, I cover world events. So I'm targeted across the world, depending on the event we cover. And it's only been a year, and look how much I've only told you about a small percentage of the amount of things that's happened to me. I just kind of hinted about some sort of assassination in Canada, for example. Imagine how crazy that is. I don't know what to believe and not to believe. These things are too far-fetched for me. It's related to the whole Israeli-Gaza war. I was on some list to be harmed, some Arab list of people that want to attack. They removed me afterwards. But I've only been doing this for a year. So, censorship exists in the US, but it exists around the world. It exists within big tech, but it exists within mainstream media. It's bad in the US, it's bad in Canada, it's bad in France, it's bad in the EU, but it's worse in Russia. It's worse in China. What's going to happen to me when I cover some major event in China or the China-Taiwan tensions and something there? What's going to happen to me that fun? It's worse in Israel. It's worse in some Arab countries, most Arab countries. So it is very worrying content, and this is like the balance I have to hold. But again, it's a great chat. I think you've asked incredible questions, and I'm glad I decided to come on here to share the story.
Well, keep fighting. I would say stick to your values, but I know you will. And stay strong, stay safe. All right,
Thanks,
man. Thanks, man. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, man.
Cool. And just want to say thanks to Web3T for hosting us, and we'll see you next time on London Real.